Hey guys, tonight we creep through the weathered door of a medieval tavern, where the air's thick with wood-smoked sour ale and a strange herbal sting. You edge past rowdy peasants, their faces flushed from drink, their voices a jumble of slurred songs and heated banter. Torches flicker on the walls, casting wobbly shadows that dance like spirits across the straw-covered floor. You're here to unravel what getting high meant in a world of endless toil, where plague lurked in alleys and winters could starve whole villages. One wrong sip in this place and you might not wake up. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're tuning in from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle onto a creaky bench near a crackling hearth, the tavern's clamor softening to a steady buzz. In medieval Europe, getting high wasn't about sleek bongs or festival lights. It was about snatching scraps of joy from a life where every day was a battle. Peasants had no drugstores, but they had hedges woods and a sharp knack for turning plans into escapes. Take henbane, a scraggly weed that sprouted in ditches and along muddy paths. Its seeds, tossed into a fire or brewed into ale, could send you floating into a dreamy haze, your worries melting away. But miscalculate the dose, and you're out cold, maybe forever. Still, folks used it desperate to dull the ache of plowing fields or the fear of a barren harvest. A 13th century herbal penned by a monk lists henbane as a soother of troubled minds, used by healers for pain, but also guzzled by tavern-goers, chasing a reckless buzz. You glance around, wondering who hears after that same thrill tonight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some villagers claimed henbane let them see fairies. Old records from rural England describe drunks bleary from a strong dose, babbling about tiny folk twirling in the moonlight. Were they just hallucinating, their brains scrambled by the plant's toxins, or did these visions feed the folklore that shaped medieval tales? Historians still argue whether these drug-fueled trips inspired stories of elves and sprites, or if the tales themselves spurred people to seek out such experiences. You catch a sharp, bitter whiff, definitely henbane smoke, drifting from a brazier in the corner. The room sways just a bit, and you grip the bench, blinking to stay focused. That stuff's no game. You notice the tavern keeper, a wiry woman, with a sly grin, slipping a pinch of dried leaves into a patron's mug. Medieval ale wasn't just fermented barley, it was a potion of whatever grew nearby. Brewers often tossed in wild herbs like darnel, a grassy weed with a mild psychoactive kick that could make you feel loose and giddy. Shadier types might add belladonna berries, nicknamed deadly nightshade, for a jolt. One sip and you're chuckling at the rafters. Two, and you're proposing to a barrel. A 12th century chronicle tells of a village where men drank and saw devils blaming ale, laced with ergot, a fungus that sparked visions or seizures. You eye your own mug, its surface shimmering oddly in the torchlight. Is that just the flame's reflection or something else? You push it aside, smirking at the thought of serenading the tavern's mangy cat. After a bad sip, better not risk it. This tavern's a snapshot of medieval grit and need. You're surrounded by folks who rise at dawn to wrestle stubborn soil, dodge tax collectors, and pray their crops don't rot. No wonder they chase highs. The room's alive with it, a tanner's warbling a ballad painfully off-key, a weaver's swaying with a broom, her steps unsteady, and someone's slumped in the corner, probably dreaming of those fairies. A juggler fumbles his apples and you stifle a laugh, bet he's tasted the keeper's special brew. Medievals didn't have Netflix or TikTok, but they had this a blurry, reckless night where the world's sharp edges softened if only for a few hours. You can't help but admire their stubborn spark even if their methods were a bit sketchy. The straw underfoot crunches as you shift the fire's warmth, seeping into your bones. That henbane smoke lingers, tickling your throat and making your head feel a touch lighter. You're starting to wonder what else these people slipped into their drinks. Life here is relentless. The man beside you, a farmer with hands like cracked leather, downs his ale like it's his last. Maybe it is plague bandits or a bad harvest could claim him by spring. Yet there's a raw joy in this room, a defiance against the grind. A spinner tosses dice her grin wide, despite missing teeth. She's probably buzzing and you respect the hustle. These folks aren't just surviving. They're stealing moments of bliss, however risky. You lean back the bench, groaning under you. The tavern keeper's watching you now, her eyes glinting with mischief. She knows you're curious and she's not wrong. This place is a microcosm of a world where every high was a gamble, part escape, part rebellion. The fire pops, sending sparks swirling upward, and the smoke thickens, curling like a living thing. You're not here for a quick sip. You're diving into a culture that danced on the edge of danger for a taste of euphoria. The noise swirls around you, laughter, clinking mugs, a slurred debate about whose pig is fattest. You smirk, picturing them arguing that one till dawn. That farmer next to you, though, he's not just drinking to forget the plow. There's something deeper, a need to feel alive, to touch something beyond the mud and toil. Medieval life was a gauntlet and highs, however crude, were a way to push back. You notice a young lad, barely old enough to shave, trying to match the older men's drinking. He's swaying, grinning like he's cracked some cosmic secret. Probably his first taste of the keeper's laced ale. You shake your head, half amused, half worried he'll end up face down in the straw. Youth right, same then as now. The tavern's energy is infectious, but it's also a reminder these people lived on a knife's edge. Every choice, work, love, or a night like this, carried weight. That henbane smoke's still teasing your senses and you're wondering what other secrets this place holds. The keeper's grin widens like she's daring you to ask for her strongest brew. You're not that brave, but you're hooked. This is just the start, a glimpse into a world where every buzz was a brush with the unknown. You lean forward, the fire's glow, warming your face, ready to see where this wild night leads. You step out of the tavern's smoky haze. The cool night air biting your cheeks as you follow a narrow path to a clearing bathed in moonlight. The village sleeps, but a faint glow flickers from a small hut where a cauldron bubbles over a fire. You're here to stir a pot of medieval herbal potions, the kind that sent minds spiraling into euphoria or terror. The scent of damp earth and crushed leaves fills your nose, and you can't help but feel like you're meddling in something dangerous. This isn't a cozy tea party. These brews could lift you to the stars or drop you into a nightmare. You crouch by the fire, the cauldron's steam curling like a beckoning finger, and wonder what secrets these villagers boiled under the moon's watchful eye. In medieval Europe, herbal potions were the backbone of both healing and escape. Every village had someone, usually a wise woman or cunning man, who knew the plants that grew in the wild and how to coax magic from them. Wormwood, a bitter herb, was a favorite. Mixed with ale or steeped in hot water, it could spark vivid dreams or a warm, buzzing calm. You dip a ladle into the cauldron, stirring a murky brew that smells like licorice and regret. Wormwood was no joke. Too much and you'd be retching or worse. A 14th century medical text, the Tequinum Sanitatis, praises wormwood for warming the spirit, but warns of its potency. Villagers didn't always heed the warnings, chasing a high to forget the grind of their lives, chopping wood, hauling water, or burying neighbors lost to fever. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some believed wormwood brews let you hear the forest speak. Scattered accounts from the Rhineland describe potion drinkers, claiming trees whispered secrets. Or animals sang. Were they tripping on wormwood's psychoactive compounds like toujon? Or were they just lonely souls weaving stories from the haze? Historians still argue whether these experiences shaped medieval animist beliefs, or if folklore encouraged the brews. You stir the cauldron, the liquid glinting under the moon, and half expect to hear a pine tree mutter your name. A spoiler, it doesn't, but the steam's making your head swim. You notice an old woman, her hands gnarled as oak roots tossing sprigs into the pot. She's the village herbwife, and her brews are legendary, part medicine, part sorcery. She matters about mugwort, another staple said to sharpen visions. Mixed with honey and ale, mugwort could make you feel like you're floating above the village, watching your own life from afar. But it wasn't just about the high. These potions were practical too. Women drank mugwort to ease childbirth pains, while men used it to dull the sting of a bad harvest. The herbwife's not just brewing for fun. She's crafting relief for a community that leans on her. You catch her eye and she smirks like she knows you're out of your depth. You grin back, pretending you're not. These brews weren't always safe. You peer into the cauldron, where dark flecks swirl. Maybe nightshade, the herbwife's riskier choice. A tiny dose could deepen the buzz, making colors brighter and sounds richer. But nightshade's a gamble. A pinch too much and you're convulsing or seeing demons. A 13th century chronicle from France describes a village feast where a misbrewed potion left half the guests raving under the stars. You imagine them stumbling through the fields, shouting at shadows. No wonder the church eyed these herbwives with suspicion, whispering about witchcraft. You dip your finger near the brew, tempted to taste, then think better of it. You're not here to end up babbling to the moon, right? The fire crackles, and you notice a few villagers lurking nearby, drawn by the cauldron's glow. They're not here for tea. They want the good stuff. A young shepherd, his cloak patched, holds out a clay cup, eager for a sip. He's probably spent all day chasing sheep through brambles. No wonder he's after a break. The herbwife pours him a ladleful, warning him to sip slowly. He doesn't listen, gulping it down and grinning like he's just won a pig. You chuckle, bet he's floating already. Medievals didn't have bars or clubs, but they had moments like this, a shared brew under the stars, a fleeting chance to feel bigger than their small, hard lives. Life here demands these escapes. You're in a world where a bad crop means hunger, a cut finger means fever, and the Lord's taxes never stop. The herbwife's hut is a sanctuary, a place where the rules of survival bend. You watch her toss in valerian root, its musky scent mingling with the steam. Valerian could calm nerves or, in stronger doses, make you feel like you're sinking into a warm, endless bed. It's no surprise folks craved it. The shepherd's now humming, swaying by the fire, his eyes glassy. You shake your head, half amused. He's gone from sheep wrangler to poet in 10 minutes flat. The cauldron steam swirls and you're starting to feel the night's pull. That henbane smoke from the tavern. Remember that lingers in your memory. But this is different, more deliberate, more intimate. The herbwife's brews aren't just about getting high. They're about connection to the earth, to each other, to something beyond the daily slog. You notice a woman, her face lined with worry, whispering to the herbwife. She's asking for a potion to ease her sick child's sleep. The herbwife nods, adding a pinch of something soft like chamomile. This isn't just a drug den, it's a lifeline. You feel a pang of respect for this woman, balancing hope and danger in every brew. The moon climbs higher and the clearing feels alive. Crickets chirping the fire's soft pop. The villagers' low murmurs. You stir the cauldron again. The liquid thicker now, almost syrupy. What else is in here? Poppy seeds, maybe, for a deeper opioid-like calm. Poppies weren't common, but traders brought them from the south and herb wives hoarded them. A 14th century apothecary's log mentions poppy syrup as a gift of forgetfulness, used sparingly for pain or grief. You imagine the shepherd sipping that, his troubles fading like smoke. But you also know the risk, too much poppy. And you're not dreaming, you're done. The herb wife's careful, but accidents happened. You swallow hard the steam, making your head buzz. This clearing's a glimpse into a world where knowledge was power and power was dangerous. The herb wife's not just brewing potions. She's holding the village's hopes and fears. You watch her work her hands, steady despite the years. A young girl, maybe her apprentice, watches too, memorizing every move. The cycle goes on plants to potions need to relief. You lean closer, the fire's warmth on your face, and realize you're not just stirring a brew. You're stirring a story of survival. The tavern's chaos feels far away now, but its spirit lingers in this quiet moonlit ritual. You're hooked, ready to see what other highs this world hides. You leave the moonlit clearing behind the herb wife's cauldron, still simmering in your memory, as you tread a winding path toward a stone monastery perched on a hill. Its walls loom dark against the starry sky, but a faint candle glow leaks from a high window. You're here to sneak into a world of chanting monks and sacred vows, where some brothers dabbled in mushrooms that promised more than spiritual insight. The night's chill seeps through your cloak, and the distant hoot of an owl makes you jump. This isn't a tavern brawl or a village ritual. Monasteries were supposed to be holy, but you're about to discover their hidden experiments with fungi that blurred the line between divine and delirious. You slip through a creaky side gate, heart pounding, and step into the shadows of a cloistered courtyard. In medieval Europe, monasteries were hubs of learning, preserving knowledge, while the world outside wrestled with chaos. Monks copied manuscripts, tended gardens, and brewed ale, but some also explored the wilder side of nature. Certain mushrooms like the rye dwell in Claviceps purpurea, better known as ergot, grew in damp fields near monastic lands. When ingested, ergot could spark vivid hallucinations, a racing pulse, or a sense of floating toward heaven. You creep past a row of herb beds, their leaves silver in the moonlight, and spot a wooden door ajar. Inside, a monk hunches over a table, grinding dried fungi into powder. He's not making bread, this is something else. A 12th century monastic record from Germany mentions ergot as a fire of the mind, used cautiously to treat ailments, but also in secret to chase visions. Monks weren't supposed to get high, but some did, cloaking their experiments in piety. Here's a quirky tidbit. A few monks claimed ergot let them speak with angels. Scribbled notes from a French abbey describe brothers seeing winged figures or hearing celestial choirs after tasting a tainted rye. Were they glimpsing God, or was ergot's LSD-like compounds playing tricks? Historians still argue whether these visions shaped mystical texts or if religious fervor drove monks to seek such experiences. You ease closer to the door, the air heavy with a musty, earthy scent. The monk doesn't notice you, too focused on his work, but the powder's faint glow in the candlelight makes your skin prickle. Angels or demons, you're not sure you want to find out. You slip inside the stone floor, cold underfoot. The monk's table is cluttered jars of dried mushrooms, a pestle, a clay cup with a dark residue. Ergot wasn't the only fungus in play. Fly agaric, the red-cap mushroom with white spots, grew in nearby woods. In small doses, it could make you feel bold, your senses razor sharp like you're hearing God's whisper in the wind. Too much and you're sweating, babbling, or seeing giants. Viking traders brought tales of fly agarics use in rituals, and some monks, curious or reckless, tried it themselves. You imagine this monk his vows of obedience, fraying, nibbling a cap, to see what truths it held. You stifle a chuckle, bet he regretted that one. A 13th century herbal warns of fly agaric's deceitful visions. But curiosity often trumped caution. These experiments weren't just for kicks. Monks lived in a world of strict rules: prayer at dawn, labor till dusk, silence through meals. Mushrooms offered a rare escape, a way to touch the divine, or at least feel something beyond the grind. You notice a second monk, younger, hovering nervously by a shelf. He's holding a psalter, but his eyes are on the powder. Maybe he's the apprentice torn between faith and temptation. The older monk murmurs something about seeking clarity, but his hands tremble. You catch a whiff of the ground fungi, sharp like wet soil after rain. It's tempting to ask for a pinch, but you're not here to trip through a monastery. You lean against the wall, staying out of sight, and watch the scene unfold. The risks were real. Ergot could do more than spark visions. It could kill. Entire villages suffered from ergot poisoning called St. Anthony's fire, with symptoms like burning limbs or gangrene. A 10th century chronicle describes a monastery where monks fell ill after eating tainted bread, some raving about demons before dying. The church frowned on such dabbling, fearing it veered into heresy, or worse, witchcraft. Yet some brothers persisted, hiding their work in cellars or under the guise of medicine. You glance at the younger monk, his face pale. He's probably heard the stories monks exiled, or worse, for crossing that line. You smirk, imagining him confessing to a mushroom-induced chat with St. Peter. Good luck explaining that one. The room's quiet, save for the soft grind of the pestle. You notice a small fire in the corner, its embers glowing. The monks aren't brewing like the herb wife remember her cauldron, but they're just as deliberate. This isn't about communal highs. It's personal, almost secretive. The older monk pours the powder into a vial, his movements careful. Maybe he's preparing for a late-night ritual, seeking a vision to impress the abbot. Or maybe he's just tired of chanting psalms. You feel a pang of sympathy. Monastic life sounds like a slog. The younger monk shifts, clutching his psalter tighter, and you wonder if he's ever tried it. His wide eyes say no, but give him a year. You step back, the shadows hiding you. The monastery's walls feel heavy, like they're holding centuries of secrets. These mushrooms weren't just a high. They were a bridge to something bigger, God truth, or maybe just a break from the rules. You think back to the tavern's henbane smoke and the herb wife's wormwood brew. The monks are different, but the urge is the same: to escape, to feel alive. A bell tolls low and mournful, signaling midnight prayers. The older monk pauses, then tucks the vial into his robe. The younger one scurries out, psalter in hand. You're alone now, the musty air thick. You could grab a pinch of that powder, but you're smarter than that. Right. The courtyard's silent as you slip out the gate, creaking behind you. The monastery looms, its secret safe for now. You're starting to see a pattern tavern clearing now. This medieval's chased highs in every corner, from ale mugs to sacred halls. The night's still young and you're hooked, wondering what other strange paths this world will show you. The hill slopes downward, leading back to the village, and you feel the pull of the next adventure. You wander back toward the village, the monastery's stone walls fading into the night as the familiar glow of the tavern beckons. But this time, you're not just here for the smoky chaos. You're diving into the mugs themselves, where medieval ale holds secrets beyond a simple buzz. The air grows warmer, thick with yeast and sweat as you elbow through the crowd to a scarred wooden bar. You're here to sip the cloudy potent brews that made peasants see stars, forget their troubles, or maybe lose their lunch. The ale's frothy surface hides a kick that's more than just alcohol. And you're about to learn why a night in this tavern could turn your world upside down. You grab a mug, its weight heavy in your hand, and brace for a taste of medieval madness. In medieval Europe, ale was lifeblood, safer than water, cheaper than wine, and a staple for everyone from kids to crones. Brewers, often women called alewives, crafted it in every village, but their recipes weren't always tame. Beyond barley and hops, some ales were spiked with wild plants or fungi that added a psychoactive punch. Gruit, a common herb mix, included bog myrtle and yarrow, which could make you feel loose, your thoughts drifting like smoke. You raise the mug, the ale's earthy scent, hitting you part malt, part something sharper like crushed pine. A 13th century brewing guide from England mentions Gruit as a lifter of spirits, but overdo it, and you're not just drunk, you're seeing things. Villagers loved it, guzzling ale, to blur the edges of a life spent dodging famine and feudal lords. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ales were so wild, drinkers swore they saw the future. A few records from the Low Countries describe tavern-goers claiming visions of battles or weddings after a heavy night. Were they tapping into prophecy, or was it just bog myrtle's mild hallucinogens at work? Historians still argue whether these experiences fueled medieval superstitions or if tall tales spread to justify the drinking. You take a cautious sip, the ale, bitter and gritty on your tongue. It's strong, and there's a strange warmth spreading through you, like your head's floating an inch above your shoulders. You're not seeing tomorrow yet, but you're starting to get why they kept pouring. The tavern's alive, a swirl of noise and motion. A burly man slams his mug down, demanding another round, while a woman cackles, spilling her drink. You spot the alewife behind the bar, her apron stained, stirring a vat of fresh brew. She's not just tossing in malt, she's adding a handful of dried herbs, her movements quick like she's hiding something. Gruit wasn't the only trick. Some ales carried traces of henbane, remember that tavern smoke, or even ergot, the same fungus the monks toyed with. Ergot could slip into rye-heavy brews, turning a pint into a ticket to dreamland or a nightmare. A 14th century chronicle from Flanders tells of a tavern where drinkers danced with shadows after a bad batch. You glance at your mug, wondering what's lurking in its depths. Maybe just ale, maybe not. Drinking here wasn't just about taste, it was escape. Life in this village is a grind, dawn to dusk, labor tax collectors at your door, and the constant threat of plague. Ale was a way to push back to feel alive for a few hours. You watch a cooper, his hands calloused down his mug in one go, grinning like he's beaten the world. He's probably buzzing from more than alcohol. The alewife's brews were social glue too. Whole communities gathered to drink trade stories or settle scores. You notice a group of farmers arguing over a land dispute, their voices slurring, their gestures wild. One's laughing too hard and you smirk, bet he's deep in the Groot haze. Medievals didn't have dive bars, but this is close, a loud, messy haven where the rules loosen. The risks were steep. Bad brews could sicken or kill. Ergot-laced ale didn't just spark visions. It could cause convulsions or worse. Entire towns suffered from ergot poisoning with symptoms like burning skin or lost limbs. The church, always watching, preached against overindulgence. But even priests tipped back mugs. You catch a glimpse of a friar in the corner, his tonsure gleaming, nursing an ale with a guilty smile. You chuckle, hypocrisy's timeless, isn't it? The alewife's not naive. She knows her brews walk a fine line. She eyes the crowd, making sure no one's keeling over. You take another sip, smaller this time, and feel a slight tingle, like your fingers are buzzing. It's not just the alcohol something's working on you. The tavern's energy pulls you in. A fiddler starts playing his notes, wobbly but cheerful, and a few peasants stumble into a dance, their steps more enthusiasm than skill. You spot a young woman, her braid swinging, trying to drag her shy friend onto the floor. They're both giggling, their mugs half empty, and you can't help but grin. This is what ale did. It turn exhaustion into joy, if only for a night. But you're also noticing the ones who've gone too far. A man slumped against the wall, muttering to himself, and another swaying dangerously near the fire. The alewife's watching them too, her face unreadable. She's part chemist, part gatekeeper, balancing profit and danger. You lean against the bar, the mug cool in your hand. The ale's cloudy surface catches the torchlight, and you're reminded of the herbwife's cauldron, its steam swirling under the moon. This is different, louder, rowdier, but the urge is the same: to escape, to feel something bigger. You think back to the monks grinding their mushrooms in secret. The tavern's no monastery, but there's a kind of ritual here too. In the clink of mugs and the shared haze, you notice an old man, his beard gray, telling a story about a dragon he saw last week. The crowd roars, half mocking, half believing. You shake your head amused. That's no dragon, just a bad brew talking. Life here is raw, and ale's the lubricant. The cooper's back arm wrestling a blacksmith, both red-faced and laughing. They're not just drunk, they're alive, pushing against a world that grinds them down. You feel a pang of respect. These folks face death daily, yet here they are toasting to nothing and everything. The alewife pours another round her herbs, tucked away, and you wonder what else she's got brewing. Your own head's buzzing, now the room's softer at the edges. You're not drunk, but you're not quite sober either. The fiddler's tune picks up, and the dancers spin faster, a blur of patched cloaks and muddy boots. You could join them, but you're here for the story, not the stumble. The night's deepening, and the tavern's warmth wraps around you. That henbane, smoke, the herbwife's potions, the monk's fungi, they're all threads in the same tapestry, woven from a need to break free. This ale's just another strand, cloudy and unpredictable. You set your mug down, half full, and catch the alewife's eye. She nods like she knows you're onto her. You're not here to get lost, you're here to understand. The tavern pulses alive with risk and revelry, and you're ready to follow this hazy trail wherever it leads next. You slip out of the tavern's raucous glow, the fiddler's tune fading as you follow a dusty track toward the village market, where dawn's first light paints the stalls in soft gold. The air's crisp, heavy with the scent of fresh bread and something sweeter, more dangerous. You're here to wander through the crowded lanes where traders hawk exotic goods, and the shadowy figure offers opium, the dark whisper that lured medieval dreamers and desperates alike. A merchant's cart creaks under bolts of silk and sacks of spices, but your eyes lock on a small resinous lump, wrapped in cloth, a substance that could soothe pain or pull you into a velvet abyss. You step closer, the market's bustle swirling around you, and feel the weight of a choice that could unravel your senses. In medieval Europe, opium was a rare but potent import, trickling in along trade routes from the east. Harvested from a poppy pods, its sticky resin was prized by apothecaries and whispered about in alleys. A tiny dose, dissolved in wine or chewed raw, could dull aches, calm nerves, or wrap you in a warm, euphoric haze, where time slowed and worries faded. You pause by the merchant's stall, his weathered hands unwrapping the cloth, to reveal the dark, tar-like opium. He murmurs about its powers, his voice low to avoid prying ears. A 13th century medical text, the Circa instance, lists opium as a sovereign remedy for pain and sleeplessness, but warns of its grip too much, and you're lost to lethargy or worse. Yet in markets like this, it found eager buyers, weary, laborers, grieving widows, even nobles, chasing a forbidden thrill. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some claim opium let them walk with the dead. A few surviving letters from Italian traders describe users dreaming of lost loved ones so vividly they swore the spirits were real. Were these visions just opium's narcotic spell, or did they shape medieval beliefs about the afterlife? Historians still argue whether such experiences influenced spiritual practices or if ghost stories drove the drug's allure. You catch the opium's faint floral scent and your head spins slightly even without tasting it. The merchant's watching you now, his smile sharp like he knows the temptation tugging at you. You move on, weaving through stalls piled with apples, wool, and iron tools. The market's a living pulse, vendors shouting, children darting underfoot, a dog sniffing spilled grain. But opium's presence casts a shadow. It wasn't just a medicine. It was a quiet rebellion against a brutal world. You spot a woman, her cloak tattered, haggling for a sliver of the resin. Her hands shake, and you wonder if she's chasing relief from a sick child's cries or her own private grief. Opium was versatile. Healers used it for surgery, but others sought its deeper pull, a way to escape the plow, the taxman, or the memory of a plague-ravaged village. You think back to the tavern's cloudy ale and the herbwife's cauldron, same urge, different poison. The risks were steep. Opium's embrace could turn deadly. Overdoses left users cold, their breaths slowing until they stopped. A 14th century chronicle from a port town describes a merchant found dead in his bed, a vial of opium syrup empty beside him. The church condemned its recreational use, calling it a sin against God's gift of reason. But enforcement was spotty. You notice a priest browsing a nearby stall, his eyes flicking toward the opium merchant before he hurries away. You smirk, bet he's torn between preaching and curiosity. The merchant, unfazed, offers a sample to a passing soldier, who waves it off but lingers untempted. You're tempted too, but you're here to observe, not to fall into that velvet trap. The market hums with life. A juggler tosses colored balls, drawing a crowd, while a baker hawks loaves, still warm from the oven. You pause by a spice stall, the air sharp with cinnamon, and overhear two women whispering about a local healer who mixes opium into her salves. It's not just the merchants pushing it, village networks spread the word. You imagine the healer's hut, not unlike the herbwife's, where a desperate mother might trade a hen for a dose to quiet her pain. Opium's allure was its promise of few moments of peace. In a world that offered none, you feel a pang for these people, their lives so fragile yet so stubborn. You circle back to the opium merchant, his stall, quieter now as the crowd thins. He's packing up, but not before slipping a small packet to a hooded figure who pays in silver. The exchange is quick practiced, and you realize opium's trade thrives in these margins, half legal, half secret. The hooded figure vanishes into the market's maze, and you wonder what drives them. A wound from battle, a heart broken by loss, or just the need to feel something else. You think of the monks grinding their mushrooms and the alewife's gruit-laced brews. Opium's darker, more intimate, but it's the same hunger to break free, to touch a world beyond the grind. The sun's climbing and the market's energy shifts, vendors, packing buyers haggling for last-minute deals. You lean against the cart, the opium scent still lingering in your memory. It's not just a drug, it's a story of survival woven into the fabric of this place. You notice a young boy, maybe 10, watching the merchant with wide eyes. He's too young to understand, but he feels the pull of something forbidden. You shake your head, half amused. kids haven't changed, always drawn to the shiny danger. The merchant shoos him off and the boy scampers away, clutching a stolen apple instead. Life here is a tightrope. The woman who bought the opium earlier is gone, her cloak lost in the crowd. You hope she finds what she's looking for, but you know the odds. Opium didn't just suit it claimed. Yet, in a world of plague carts and empty harvests, who could blame her? You feel the market's rhythm slowing, the day's heat creeping in. The tavern's ale, the herbwife's potions, the monk's fungi, they're all cousins to this resin, each a way to push against the weight of living. You step away from the stall, the merchant's eyes following you. He knows you're curious, but you're not here to buy, you're here to understand. The market's colors blur. As you walk, the opium's whisper, fading but not gone. You're starting to see this world clearer now. A place where every high, every escape was a gamble with stakes higher than you'd ever play. The path ahead leads deeper into the village, and you feel the pull of the next secret, the next taste of medieval defiance. You're not done yet, not by a long shot. You leave the market's fading bustle, the opium merchant's sharp gaze lingering in your mind as you follow a twisting path into the village outskirts where gnarled trees claw at the sky. The air grows heavy, damp with moss and secrets as you approach a patch of earth marked by strange, forked roots poking through the soil. You're here to unearth Mandrake, the medieval plant of legend. Its hallucinogenic pull as dangerous as it was irresistible. The moon hangs low, casting an eerie glow, and you kneel beside the roots, your fingers hovering over their twisted shapes. Digging them up feels like tempting fate. One wrong move and you're dancing with visions or death. You glance around, half expecting a witch to scold you, and brace for a dive into the risky world of Mandrake's dark magic. In medieval Europe, Mandrake was the stuff of myth and medicine, its human-like roots believed to hold supernatural power. Buried in folklore, it was said to scream when uprooted, dooming the careless digger. But its real danger was chemical. Mandrake's roots, leaves, and berries packed alkaloids like scopolamine, which could send you into a twilight state, half dream, half reality, where the world warped and color sang. You grasp a root, its texture rough and oddly warm, and tug, gently mindful of the tales. A 12th century herbal, the Physica, by Hildegard of Bingen, describes Mandrake as a healer of the mind, used in tiny doses for pain or madness, but warns of its deceitful fire. Villagers, healers, and thrill-seekers ignored the warnings, chasing its visions to escape the plow or glimpse the divine. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some swore Mandrake let them fly without wings. Scattered accounts from Germany describe users feeling weightless, soaring over fields in their minds after chewing the root. Were these trips just scopolamine's haze? Or did they fuel tales of witches soaring on broomsticks? Historians still argue whether Mandrake's highs shaped witchcraft lore, or if the stories drove its use. You pull the root free, its shape disturbingly human, and feel a chill. The air's thicker now, like the plant's whispering its own warning. You're not eating this thing, but its presence alone makes your head buzz as if the ground's alive. You stand clutching the mandrake and notice a faint path leading to a hut half hidden by brambles. Smoke curls from its chimney and you're drawn closer, the root heavy in your hand. Inside, an old woman, maybe a healer, maybe something more, stirs a pot, her eyes flicking to your prize. She nods unsurprised and gestures to a table littered with dried roots and vials. Mandrake wasn't just a high, it was a tool. Healers mixed it into salves for wounds or insomnia, while others brewed it into potions for rituals. But its recreational use was where things got wild. A small nibble could make you see spirits or forget your name. A larger dose and you're convulsing, lost in a nightmare. You imagine the old woman's client's peasants' lovers, maybe a rogue priest, begging for a taste. You smirk, picturing them regretting it by morning. The risks were no joke. Mandrake's alkaloids could stop your heart or trap you in a delirium so deep you'd wander fields, raving until you collapsed. A 13th century chronicle from Italy tells of a village where a healer's mandrake brew left 3 men wandering as ghosts, unable to speak for days. The church branded it devil's work, linking it to sorcery. Yet demand never waned. You glance at the woman, her hands steady as she slices a root. She's no fool, she knows the line between medicine and madness. You're tempted to ask for a sample, but the memory of the opium merchant's grin stops you. You're here to learn not to lose yourself in a roots fever dream. The hut's dim lit by a single candle, and the air's thick with herbs, some familiar like the herb wife's wormwood, others alien. You spot a bundle of mandrake hanging from the rafters, its roots tied with twine. This woman's a keeper of secrets like the alewife, or the monks with their mushrooms. Mandrake was rare, harder to find than henbane or opium, which made it a status symbol. Wealthy lords paid dearly for it, hoping to glimpse prophecy or cure their melancholy. You imagine a noble cloaked in velvet slipping her coins for a vial, then stumbling through his manor babbling about dragons. You chuckle, money didn't buy sense back then either. Outside, the wind picks up rustling the trees. You step back into the night, the mandrake still in your hand, its weight grounding you. The village feels distant, but you hear faint laughter. Maybe the tavern's still going strong. Mandrake wasn't a communal high like ale. It was personal, introspective, a journey you took alone. You think of the market's opium, its velvet pool, and the monk's ergot visions. Mandrake's different, wilder, less predictable. You pass a field where a lone figure digs their lantern bobbing. Another root hunter risking the scream for a chance at ecstasy. You shake your head, half admiring their nerve. Medievals were nothing if not bold. The path curves and you're alone again, the hut's glow fading. Mandrake's allure was its mystery part, plant part, myth, all danger. You toss the root into the grass, not willing to carry it further. The stories are enough, villagers seeing spirits, healers skirting the church's wrath, nobles chasing shadows. Life here was a gauntlet, sick kids, empty fields, lords demanding tithes. No wonder they dug for mandrake, hoping its fire could burn away the weight. You feel a pang for them, their stubborn fight for a spark of something more. The tavern's ale, the herb wife's brews, the monk's fungi, the market's opium, they're all kin to this root, each a defiance against a world that ground them down. The moon's sinking and the air's colder now. You're starting to see this place for what it is, a tapestry of need, woven with risky highs and desperate hopes. The mandrake's gone, but its whisper lingers like the tavern's smoke or the market's spice. You're not here to join the dance, you're here to trace its steps. The path stretches ahead, leading deeper into the village's secrets, and you're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy tale. You turn from the shadowy mandrake patch, the root's eerie weight still lingering in your thoughts, as you join a dusty road where a line of pilgrims shuffles toward a distant shrine. Their cloaks are patched, their faces weary, but lit with hope, and the air hums with murmured prayers and the clink of rosaries. You're here to walk among them, to uncover how their holy quests sometimes blurred into psychedelic trips, fueled by strange substances that turn devotion into delirium. The morning sun burns off the mist, and you fall in step, your boots kicking up dirt alongside theirs. Something's off though, a few pilgrims sway, their eyes glassy as if they're seeing more than the road ahead. You're about to learn how faith and frenzy collided in medieval pilgrimages, And it's not as saintly as it sounds. In medieval Europe, pilgrimages were a sacred duty, drawing thousands to shrines like Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela to seek healing, forgiveness, or divine favor. But the journey was grueling, weeks of walking bandits and bad food. To cope, some pilgrims turned to herbs or brews that promised stamina or spiritual insight, only to find themselves lost in visions. St. John's wort, a roadside weed, was a common pick. Chewed raw or steeped in water, it could lift moods or in higher doses spark hallucinations, making the sky pulse, or the trees whisper psalms. You notice a pilgrim, his staff, wobbling, clutching a sprig of the yellow flower plant. A 14th century pilgrim's guide mentions St. John's wort as a balm for the soul used to fend off despair, but it doesn't warn about the visions that came with overuse. These folks weren't just praying, they were chasing a glimpse of heaven whatever the cost. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some pilgrims swore they saw saints in the clouds after dozing up. A few accounts from the Camino de Santiago describe travelers claiming St. James appeared glowing after they chewed holy herbs. Were they high on St. John's wort's psychoactive kick, or was faith amplifying their trips? Historians still argue whether these visions shaped pilgrimage lore or if shrine stories encouraged the herb use. You glance at the swaying pilgrim, his lips moving silently. He's either deep in prayer or seeing St. Peter wave from a hilltop. You stifle a chuckle, bet it's the latter and he's not telling anyone. The road stretches on, flanked by fields, and the occasional cross marking a holy spring. You're surrounded by a mix of devotees, farmers, merchants, even a limping noblewoman, her veil askew. They're all after miracles, but the journey's toll is clear. Blistered feet, empty bellies, and the constant fear of robbers. No wonder some turn to plants for help. You spot another pilgrim, a wiry man, with a sunburned face, passing a leather flask to his neighbor. It's not water. There's a sharp herbal tang in the air like the herbwife's wormwood brew. Maybe it's a mix of St. John's wort and other roadside finds like mugwort, which could make you feel like you're floating toward God. You remember the tavern's cloudy ale and the monk's ergot. This is just another way to blur the edges of a hard road. The risks were real. Overdose on St. John's wort, and you're not just seeing saints. You're dizzy, nauseous, or burning under the sun. Your skin hypersensitive. A 13th century chronicle from France tells of a pilgrimage where a group maddened by herbs wandered off the path raving about angels until they collapsed. The church tolerated some remedies but drew a line at anything smacking of sorcery. You notice a monk trailing the group, his eyes sharp, watching for signs of excess. He's probably here to keep the faithful in line, but you catch him sniffing the flask's scent, curious. You smirk. Even the holy ones aren't immune to temptation, are they? The pilgrim's chatter grows louder as you near a roadside chapel, its bell tolling softly. A woman kneels, clutching a relic, a saint's bone, maybe her face wrapped, but her hands tremble and her pupils are wide like she's seeing more than the altar. She's not alone. Others in the group are unsteady, their prayers slurring into gibberish. These visions weren't always welcome. Some pilgrims feared they'd been tricked by the devil, not blessed by God. You imagine them confessing later, tearful, to a priest who'd rather burn the herbs than hear the story. The wiry man offers you the flask, his grin lopsided. You wave it off, half tempted but wiser than that. You're here to watch the chaos, not join it. The road's rhythm is hypnotic boots on gravel. The creak of a cart, the low hum of a hymn. You feel the pilgrim's hope, their desperation. They're not just walking for salvation. They're escaping lives of toil, loss, or shame. The herbs were a shortcut, a way to feel closer to the divine without waiting for a miracle. You notice a young girl, barely a teen, trailing her mother. She's chewing something, maybe a leaf she plucked, and her eyes are bright, too bright. Her mother doesn't notice, lost in her own prayers. You shake your head, half amused, half worried. Kids always find the trouble, don't they? Medieval or modern, it's the same. The sun climbs and the group pauses by a stream to refill flasks and soak sore feet. You sit on a rock watching the scene. The monks, still lurking now, lecturing a pilgrim who's giggling too loudly. The herbs are working overtime today. You think back to the mandrake's twisted roots, the opium's velvet whisper, the monk's fungi. Pilgrims weren't so different, they just dressed their highs in holiness. A man nearby starts singing, his voice wobbly but joyful, and others join in, their words garbled. The flask is making rounds again and you're starting to wonder what's in it. Not enough to kill them, but enough to make this road feel like a path to paradise. The chapel's bell fades and the group moves on their steps, lighter despite the miles. You fall back, letting the crowd pull ahead. This pilgrimage is a microcosm of the medieval world, faith and folly, hope and hazard all mixed in a dusty march. The swaying pilgrims still muttering, maybe to a saint, maybe to a tree. You feel a pang for these people, their lives so fragile yet so fierce. They're not just seeking shrines. They're seeking release, same as the tavern drunks or the herbwife's clients. The road stretches toward the horizon, and you're hooked, ready to follow this hazy trail to its next strange turn. You drift away from the pilgrims' dusty trail, their hymns fading, as you veer into a tangled wood where moonlight barely pierces the canopy. The air's damp, thick with pine and decay, and a faint glow flickers from a clearing ahead. You're here to peek into the secretive world of witches where whispered rituals and potent ointments promised flights to other realms. A crude hut looms its walls, mossy and leaning, and you catch the sharp scent of herbs, something like the herbwife's brews, but darker, wilder. You're not here to join their circle, but to glimpse the salves they smeared on skin, chasing visions that blurred magic and madness. You creep closer, heart thumping, and feel the forest holding its breath. In medieval Europe, witches were often just women on the fringes, healers, midwives, or loners who knew too much about plants. Their flying ointments, thick pastes of fat and herbs, were infamous. Smoothed onto skin, these salves could spark hallucinations so vivid users swore they soared over villages or danced with spirits. Belladonna, with its glossy black berries, was a key ingredient. Its atropine could make your heart race, and your mind untethered, turning trees into giants, or stars into eyes. You peer through the hut's cracked door, where a woman stirs a clay pot, her hands stained green. A 15th century inquisitor's manual, the Malleus Maleficarum, describes such ointments as devil's grease, claiming they summon demons, but science says it was just chemistry. Belladonna, henbane, and mandrake. Remember those roots messing with the brain? These women weren't flying, they were tripping hard. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some users claim they joined sabbats in their visions, feasting with strange beings in moonlit glades. A few trial records from Germany describe women confessing to these gatherings, vivid with details of music and masks. Were they just high on alkaloids? Or did shared stories shape their trips? Historians still argue whether these visions birthed witchcraft myths, or if folklore fueled the ointment's use. You catch a whiff from the pot, bitter like burnt leaves, and your head spins even from this distance. The woman doesn't see you, but her low chant sends a shiver down your spine. You're not sure if it's fear or the fumes. Inside the hut's a cluttered den of jars, roots, and bones. The woman may be a healer, maybe the village's witch adds a pinch of something dark to her salve. Henbane's likely in there too, its musky kick familiar from the tavern's smoke. These ointments weren't casual. They were deliberate, applied in rituals to commune with spirits or escape a life of drudgery. You imagine her smearing the paste on her arms, lying back as the forest dissolves into a whirl of colors and shapes. It wasn't just women, men dabbled too, though they rarely faced the same accusations. The salve's effects were unpredictable. One night you're dancing with fairies. The next, you're vomiting or seeing claws in the dark. You smirk, picturing a cocky villager trying it, and waking up screaming about goats. Rookie mistake. The risks were brutal. Belladonna could stop your heart. Henbane could choke your breath. Overdoses left users comatose or dead. And the church's witch hunts turned survivors into targets. A 14th century trial in France records a woman burned for flying after neighbors saw her rub, salve, and collapse raving. The hut's walls seemed to close in, as you watch the air heavy with danger. This woman's no fool, she works alone. Her door barred, her secrets guarded. You think of the pilgrim's herb-laced flask, the monk's ergot, the market's opium. Her ointments are kin, but they're rawer, tied to the earth and the night. You're tempted to knock to ask her craft, but the memory of mandrake's twisted roots keeps you still. You're here to watch, not to burn. The clearing's quiet, save for the fire's crackle and the woman's chant. A shadow moves, another figure cloaked, slipping into the hut. A client maybe, or an apprentice. You catch a glimpse of their hands exchanging a small jar. The salve's greasy sheen catching the light. These ointments weren't cheap. Animal fat, rare herbs, and the maker's silence came at a price. Villagers traded eggs, wool, or secrets for a dose, knowing the risk of betrayal. You imagine the cloaked figure, a mother perhaps seeking visions to find a lost child, or a lover chasing a forbidden thrill. The woman's voice dips, warning her to use it sparingly. You shake your head half amused. Good luck with that, medievals weren't big on restraint. The forest feels alive, its branches creaking like they're listening. You step back, the hut's glow dimming. These women walked a razor's edge, their knowledge both power and peril. The church called them witches, but to their clients, they were lifelines offering escape when the world pressed too hard. You think of the alewife's gruit, the herbwife's cauldron, the pilgrim's herbs. This is darker, more solitary. But the hunger's the same, to break free. To touch something beyond the plow or the priest. A bat flits overhead, and you jump, then laugh softly. This place is getting to you, isn't it? You circle the clearing, keeping to the shadows. The woman's done now, her pot, cooling her chant, silent. The cloaked figures gone melted into the trees. You wonder what they'll see tonight, Sabbath spirits, or just their own fears magnified. Ointments were a gamble like opium or mandrake, but they carried a stigma the others didn't. A man could drink ale or chew St. John's wort and call it medicine. A woman with a salve was a witch. You feel a pang for her alone in that hut. Her skills a double-edged sword. The night's deepening and the forest chill seeps into your bones. You're starting to see this world's pattern. Every high, every escape came with a cost, and some paid more than others. The path out of the wood beckons, leading back to the village. You leave the hut behind, its secrets safe for now. The ointment's scent lingers sharp and haunting like a warning you can't quite shake. You're not here to smear salve or fly. You're here to trace the threads of this wild, desperate world. The stars peek through the trees, and you feel the pull of the next secret, ready to see where this hazy journey twists next. You emerge from the witch's shadowed wood, the ointment's bitter scent, fading as you follow a cobblestone road toward a looming castle. Its towers piercing the dawn sky. The air shifts, carrying the tang of polished steel and rosewater, a stark contrast to the village's mud and smoke. You're here to infiltrate the world of nobles, where wealth bought exotic highs that rivaled the witches' salves or the pilgrims' herbs. Guards in chainmail eye you warily, but you slip through a servant's gate, heart racing into a courtyard, bustling with silk-clad courtiers and clinking goblets. You're not here to sip their wine. You're here to unveil the royal indulgences, the imported substances that sent kings and ladies spinning into decadence. The castle's grandeur hides a haze as wild as any tavern's, and you're about to peek behind the velvet curtain. In medieval Europe, royalty and their courts had access to luxuries peasants could only dream of, including rare drugs from distant lands, while villagers chewed henbane or dug mandrake. Nobles imported saffron hashish and even early forms of distilled spirits from the Islamic world or the Far East. Hashish, a resin from cannabis, was a favorite in wealthier circles, especially after crusaders brought tales and samples back from the Levant. Mixed with honey or wine, it could wrap you in a giggly, languid euphoria, making banquet halls feel like floating gardens. You sneak into a lavish hall where a lord lounges on a cushioned bench, nibbling a sticky sweetmeat that smells faintly of earth and spice. A 13th century Arabic medical text, translated for European courts, praises hashish for unlocking the soul's joy but warns of confusion or stupor. Nobles didn't always listen chasing bliss to impress or escape their gilded cages. Here's a quirky tidbit some nobles claimed: hashish let them see their ancestors' battles. A few courtly chronicles from France describe lords recounting vivid dreams of ancient wars after a dose, as if they'd fought alongside Charlemagne. Were these just cannabis-fueled fantasies, or did the drug tap into their obsession with lineage? Historians still argue whether this vision shaped noble identity, or if dynastic pride drove the indulgence. You catch a whiff of the lord's sweetmeat, its scent curling through the air, and your head feels light like you're half invited to his dream. The hall's tapestries shimmer, and you blink to stay sharp. This place is seductive, but you're not here to lose yourself. You weave through the crowd, past ladies in jeweled gowns, whispering behind fans, and knights boasting over goblets. The banquet table groans with roasted peacock figs and gold-dusted pastries, but your eyes are on a silver tray of spice confections likely laced with hashish or saffron. Saffron, worth more than gold, wasn't just a spice. In large doses, it could spark laughter or mild hallucinations, making colors pop and music thrum. Nobles loved it for its rarity, and kicked tossing it into wine or desserts to show off. You imagine a lady, her cheeks flushed, giggling at a jester's bad joke, her senses heightened by a saffron-laced tart. You smirk, bet she thinks he's hilarious now. The opulence here dwarfs the market's opium or the herbwife's brews, but the urge is the same: to transcend, to feel more than mortal. The risks were real even for the rich. Hashish could leave you sluggish, paranoid, or stuck in a fog for days. Overuse of saffron risked nausea. Or worse, chronicles mention a countess who saw demons after too many spice cakes. The church, ever watchful, condemned such excess as gluttony or heresy, but nobles often dodged scrutiny with bribes or private chapels. You spot a bishop at the banquet, his robes, brushing the floor, sampling a suspicious pastry with a sly grin. You chuckle, hypocrisy's a universal language, isn't it? Servants bustle, refilling goblets with wine that might hide more than grapes. Maybe a drop of opium syrup, another noble favorite. You think of the monks' ergot and the witches' salves. Even in this castle, the line between indulgence and danger is thin. The hall's a whirl of color and sound, lutes, strumming laughter rising, a peacock's tail fanning across a platter. You slip closer to the lord, who's now recounting a vision of his great-grandfather's victory. His words slurred. His courtiers nod, half listening, half dazed themselves. This isn't the tavern's rowdy chaos, or the pilgrim's dusty march, its polish perfumed, but no less reckless. Nobles chased highs to escape the pressure of politics, arranged marriages, or the constant threat of betrayal. You notice a young page, barely old enough to serve, sneaking a nibble from the tray. His eyes widen and he sways, grinning like he's cracked a secret. You shake your head, amused kids always find the trouble, don't they? You move to a quieter corner, where a tapestry depicts a hunt, its threads glinting in candlelight. The air's heavy with hashish and rosewater, and you're starting to feel the castle's pull, its promise of pleasure, its hidden traps. A lady nearby, her gown embroidered with pearls, sips from a goblet, her gaze distant. Maybe she's lost in a hashish dream, seeing nights or stars. You feel a pang for her. Even wealth can't buy peace. The Lord's voice rises now, boasting of a prophecy from his sweetmeat. The courtiers laugh, but you wonder how many are humoring him, their own minds adrift. This is no village hut. The stakes are higher, the highs more refined. But the hunger's the same as the alewives grew it, or the mandrake's fire. The banquet stretches on, and you slip toward a balcony overlooking the courtyard. The night air clears your head, but the castle's haze lingers in your memory. These nobles weren't just indulging, they were performing, proving their power through excess. You think of the market's opium, the pilgrims' herbs, the witches' ointments. The castle's drugs are pricier, but the goal's no different to blur the edges of a world that demands too much. A guard patrols below, his torch flickering, and you realize even he might sneak a sip of something forbidden. The line between lord and peasant blurs in the pursuit of escape. You lean against the stone railing, the stars sharp above. The castle's a gilded trap, its highs as risky as any tavern brew. You're not here to taste their sweets or sip their wine. You're here to see the truth beneath the shine. The music drifts up softer now, and you feel the pull of the village below, where more secrets wait. You're ready for the next step in this wild, hazy journey. You descend from the castle's lofty perch, its opulent haze fading as you weave back through the village, where the air hums with the earthy scent of hay and wood smoke. Torches flicker along a muddy square where peasants gather for a raucous festival, their laughter and stomping feet drowning out the night's quiet. You're here to crash their party, not for the dancing or ale, but to uncover the mind-altering concoctions they slipped into their revelry tricks that turned a harvest feast into a wild, blurry dream. The crowd sways, mugs raised, and you spot a glint of mischief in their eyes, a hint that tonight's not just about bread and song. You elbow into the throng, the heat of bodies and bonfires wrapping around you, ready to discover how these folks spun their hard lives into euphoric chaos. In medieval Europe, village festivals were rare breaks from relentless labor where peasants celebrated harvests, saints' days, or weddings with food music and enough ale to float a barn. But some took it further, lacing their drinks or snacks with herbs and fungi to amplify the fun. Hedge mustard, a common weed, was a sneaky favorite. Its seeds, ground into bread or stirred into ale, could spark a mild, giddy high, making you feel like the world's spinning just for you. You grab a hunk of coarse bread from a passing tray, its crust flecked with dark specks that smell faintly peppery. A 14th century cookbook from England mentions hedge mustard as a merry spice, used to liven feasts, but doesn't warn about the giggles or visions that followed. These villagers weren't just eating, they were chasing a spark to light up their toil-worn lives. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some partygoers claimed the bread let them talk to the harvest spirits. A few oral tales from the British Isles describe revelers swearing they saw corn maidens or field sprites after munching spiked loaves. Were they just buzzing on mustard's subtle kick, or did the festival's fervor shape their visions? Historians still argue whether these experiences fed pagan holdovers, or if old myths encouraged the herb use. You bite into the bread, its taste, sharp and strange, and feel a faint tingle, like your thoughts are loosening. The bonfire's flames seem to dance a little wilder, but you shake it off. You're not here to chat with spirits, just to see how far this party goes. The square's a whirlwind, fiddles, screech, children, dart through legs, and a juggler tosses apples, half of them landing in the mud. You spot a woman, her apron dusted with flour, passing out more of the speckled bread. She's no alewife, but her grin says she knows what's in it. Hedge mustard wasn't the only trick. Some festivals featured fool's parsley, a plant that could mimic the buzz of henbane, making you laugh at nothing or see faces in the fire. You think back to the tavern's groot-laced ale, and the witch's belladonna salves. These party tricks are humbler, but no less bold. A man stumbles past his mug, sloshing, singing about a cow that flew. You smirk, bet he's deep in the parsley haze. These concoctions weren't just for laughs. They were defiance. Life here is brutal fields to plow, lords to pay, winters to survive. Festivals were a middle finger to that grind, a chance to feel free even if it meant risking a bad trip. You watch a farmer, his hands scarred from sides, twirl his wife in a clumsy dance, both giggling like kids. Their breaths probably spiked, and you can't blame them for wanting this moment. But the risks were real. Fool's parsley could turn toxic, causing cramps or worse. Hedge mustard in excess left you dizzy for days. A 13th century village record from France notes a feast where many rave till dawn, some never waking. The church grumbled about excess, but even the local priests here, munching bread with a guilty smile. You chuckle. Nobody's immune to a good time, are they? The bonfire roars, and you weave through the crowd, dodging a drunk who's trying to hug a barrel. A group of women huddles near a cart, whispering as they stir a pot of stew. You catch a whiff herbal sharp like the herb wife's cauldron. Maybe they've tossed in wild thyme, another festival trick that could make you feel bold, your fears melting. These women are the party's alchemists, slipping in just enough to keep the night alive without killing anyone. You imagine them testing the dose, giggling over a villager who saw a ghost last year. The stew's ladled out, and a boy grabs a bowl, slurping it down before his mother can stop him. You shake your head, amused. Kids always dive in head first, don't they? The festival's heart is its chaos. Everyone's equal here. Lord's tides, forgotten plow left in the barn. You spot an old man, his beard tangled, telling a story about a sky horse he saw after last year's feast. The crowd roars, half mocking, but he's undeterred, his eyes glassy. This is what the herbs did, turned farmers into poets, if only for a night. You think of the castle's hashish sweets, the pilgrim St. John's wort, the witch's salves. The peasants' tricks are cruder, but the hunger's the same, to escape, to feel bigger than the mud under their boots. The woman with the bread offers you another piece, her grin daring. You wave it off, not ready to see sky horses yourself. The night deepens, and the square's a blur of motion dancers, spinning mugs, clinking a dog, barking at the juggler's dropped apples. You lean against a cart, the bonfire's warmth on your face. The bread specks linger in your memory, like the tavern's ale or the mandrake's roots. These villagers aren't just partying, they're stealing joy from a world that gives them little. You feel a pang for them, their lives so fragile yet so fierce. The fiddle's slow, and a hush falls as someone starts a ballad, their voice wobbly but earnest. The crowd sways, some still buzzing, others just drunk on the moment. You're not here to dance, you're here to see the spark that keeps them going. The stars wheel above, and you step back, the festival's glow, holding you a moment longer. These party tricks, mustard parsley thyme, are threads in the same tapestry as opium ergot and belladonna, each a way to push back the dark. The square pulses alive with risk and revelry, and you're ready for the next secret this wild hazy world has to show. You slip away from the festival's fading embers, the villagers' laughter echoing, as you follow a quiet path to a low-roofed hut. On the village edge, its windows glowing faintly. The air's cool, scented with damp earth and herbs. A familiar tang that pulls you back to the herbwife's cauldron. You're here to visit a healer, not for a festival buzz or a noble's decadence, but to uncover the risky remedies they crafted herbal blends that teetered between curing pain and altering minds. Smoke curls from the chimney, and you knock softly, the door creaking open, to reveal a cluttered room lit by a single candle. You're stepping into a world where medicine and magic blur, where every potion carries a gamble. You breathe in the sharp green aroma, ready to see how these healers balanced life and delirium. In medieval Europe, healers, often women known as cunning folk or leeches, were the village lifeline, treating fevers, wounds, and broken hearts with plants from fields and forests. But their remedies often doubled as mind-benders. Valerian root dug from marshy soil was a go-to for calming nerves or inducing sleep. But in stronger doses, it could plunge you into a dreamy haze where thoughts drifted like mist. You spot a bundle of valerian on the healer's table, its musky scent mingling with dried lavender. A 13th century medical text, the Trotula, recommends valerian for restless spirits, but notes its power to loosen the mind if overused. Healers knew this, yet some patients begged for the stronger stuff, craving relief from chronic pain or the weight of a peasant's life. Endless toil-hungry winters and lord's demands. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some claimed valerian let them dream of lost loves. A few oral accounts from southern France describe patients seeing departed spouses or friends in vivid sleep after a potent dose. Were these just the herb's sedative effects, or did they shape medieval grieving rituals? Historians still argue whether such dreams influenced spiritual beliefs or if folklore drove the remedy's appeal. You pick up a valerian sprig, its texture rough, and feel a subtle calm, like the room's softening around you. The healer, a wiry woman with gray-streaked hair, watches you with a knowing smile. She's seen that look before, curiosity mixed with caution. You're not here to sleep, though. You're here to learn her craft's edge. The hut's a treasure trove. Jars of roots, vials of syrup, a mortar crusted with green paste. The healer's grinding something, maybe poppy seeds, another staple. Poppies, rare but prized, yielded a milky sap that could kill pain or send you into a deep opioid-like trance. She's careful, measuring a pinch into a clay cup, her hands steady. These remedies weren't just for healing. They were escapes. A farmer with a crushed leg might need poppy to survive the night, but others sought it to forget a dead child or a barren field. You think of the festival's hedge, mustard bread, the castle's hashish, the witch's salves. Same hunger, different tools. The healers know which, but her work skirts the same danger, blending care with risk. You imagine a patient wild-eyed begging for more poppy than she'll give. You smirk, she's too smart for that. The risks were steep. Poppy could stop your breath. Valerian in excess left you groggy or hallucinating shadows. A 14th century chronicle from England tells of a healer blamed for a man's death after a sleeping draught went wrong, his family crying witchcraft. The church hovered ready to pounce on anything too potent, but villagers trusted their healers more than distant priests. You notice a small cross on the wall, a nod to faith, but the healer's real power lies in her jars. She pours the poppy mix into a vial, her eyes flicking to you like she's sizing up your nerve. You're tempted to ask for a taste, But the memory of the opium merchant's grin keeps you still. You're here to watch, not to drift. The hut's warm, the candles glow dancing on the walls. A knock comes, and a young man limps in his arm, bandaged, his face pale. He's here for relief, maybe from a cart accident. The healer hands him a valerian tea, warning him to sip slowly. He nods, but his eyes are desperate and you wonder if he'll sneak an extra dose later. Healers walk the tightrope too little, and the patient suffered. Too much and they're raving or dead. You feel a pang for her. Her skill both a gift and a burden. She's not just mixing herbs. She's holding lives together like the herb wife, the ale wife, or the monks with their fungi. This hut's a sanctuary, but it's no safe haven. Every remedy's a roll of the dice. You step back, letting the healer work. The man sips his tea, his shoulders easing, and you catch a whiff of the brew, earthy, slightly sweet. Outside, the night's still safe for a distant dog's bark. You notice a girl peeking through the door, maybe the healer's apprentice. Her eyes wide as she watches the exchange. She's learning just like you, but her stakes are higher one day. She'll carry this weight. You think of the pilgrim's flask, the mandrake's roots, the castle's sweets. The healer's remedies are quieter, tied to need more than revelry, but they're no less potent. You imagine a mother slipping in, later trading a loaf for a vial to ease her baby's fever. This is the village's heartbeat, care, laced with danger. The candle sputters and you lean against the wall, the hut's warmth sinking in. The healer's world is small but vast, each jar a story of pain and hope. You're starting to see the threads connecting this place to the tavern, the market, the castle, every high, every cure, a fight against the grind. The young man leaves his limp softer, and the healer turns back to her mortar, her rhythm unbroken. You're not here to heal or be healed. You're here to trace the line between salvation and surrender. The path outside calls leading deeper into the village's secrets, and you're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy tale. You step out of the healer's hut, the valerian's musky scent clinging to your cloak as you follow a winding path toward a secluded grove where a lone figure kneels in prayer beneath ancient oaks. The air is still heavy with dew, and the faint hum of distant chants and moonlight filters through the branches, casting dappled shadows. You're here to follow mystics, those fervent souls who saw divine ecstasy through natural intoxicants, blurring the line between holy rapture and earthly haze. The figure, a woman, her robes patched but clean, sways gently, a clay vial at her side. You're not here to pray or sip her brew. You're here to uncover how these seekers used plants to chase God, risking their minds for a glimpse of eternity. You crouch in the shadows, the grove's silence wrapping around you, embrace for a journey into faith's wild edge. In medieval Europe, mystics, men and women driven by spiritual hunger, often lived apart in hermitages or groves, seeking union with the divine. Some turned to plants like thornapple, a spiky weed with seeds that could spark visions of angels or plunge you into delirium. Known as the tura, its alkaloids triggered intense hallucinations, making prayers feel like conversations with God. You inch closer, spotting the woman's vial. Its contents dark and oily, maybe a thorn apple infusion. A 14th century mystical text attributed to Julian of Norwich hints at herbs of revelation used to deepen meditation, though it warns of their fierce light. Mystics weren't chasing fun. They wanted transcendence, a way to escape the body's limits and touch the infinite, even if it meant dancing with madness. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some mystics claimed torn apple let them hear heaven's bells. Scattered accounts from Italian convents describe nuns hearing celestial music or seeing golden gates after sipping such brews. Were these visions just Datura's toxic tricks? Or did they shape mystical writings? Historians still argue whether these experiences influence texts like The Cloud of Unknowing, or if spiritual longing drove the plant's use. You catch a faint, acrid whiff from the vial, and your head spins like the groves tilting. The woman's chants grow louder, her voice trembling with awe, and you wonder if she's hearing those bells now. You're not joining her, but the air's alive with her fervor, and it's hard not to feel the pull. The grove is sparse, just a circle of oaks and a crude stone altar, but it feels sacred, heavy with intent. The woman's hands clutch a rosary, but her eyes are fixed on something unseen. Her face glowing. Torn apple wasn't her only tool. Mystics also use henbane, that tavern smoke again, or mugwort, blending them into teas or inhaling their fumes. These plants could make you feel weightless, your soul soaring, but they were no gentle guides. A wrong dose and you're not seeing God, you're convulsing, lost in terrors. You think of the healer's poppy, the witches, belladonna, the castles, hashish. Mystics were different, their highs cloaked in piety, but the risk was just as real. You imagine this woman alone, night after night, chasing divinity with a vial and a prayer. You smirk, talk about commitment. The dangers were steep. Datura could blind you, stop your heart, or trap you in a waking nightmare. A 13th century chronicle from Germany tells of a hermit found dead in his cave. A datura-laced vial beside him, his face frozen in a mix of bliss and fear. The church was torn. Some saw mystics as saints, others as heretics flirting with the devil. You notice a small cross carved into the altar, a nod to orthodoxy, but the woman's vial tells another story. She's no nun, but her faith is raw, unpolished. She sips from the vial, her movements slow, deliberate, and you hold your breath, half expecting her to collapse. She doesn't just kneels, chanting softer now, lost in her vision. You're not here to judge. You're here to see how far faith can push a soul. The grove's stillness is broken by a rustle. A fox darting through the underbrush. You flinch, then laugh quietly. Nature's keeping you grounded. The woman doesn't notice her world elsewhere. Mystics like her weren't common, but their influence rippled. Their visions, scribbled in margins or whispered to pilgrims, shaped how people saw God, sin, or salvation. You think of the pilgrims St. John's wort, their saintly clouds. This is purer, more solitary, but no less desperate, a quest for meaning in a world of plague and hunger. The vial's contents shimmer in the moonlight, and you're tempted to peek closer, but the healer's warning about poppy lingers. You're here to observe, not to chase angels. You shift the damp grass, soaking your knees. The woman's chants fade, and she lies back, staring at the stars. Is she seeing heaven or just the oaks? You'll never know, but her peace is palpable. A stark contrast to the festival's chaos or the castle's excess. Mystics didn't seek highs for fun, they sought truth even if it burned. You notice a second vial half buried into grass, maybe a spare or a mistake. A young man could stumble on it thinking it's ale, and end up raving till dawn. You shake your head amused. Trouble finds the curious, doesn't it? The grove feels like a threshold, a place where earth and eternity meet. And you're starting to understand why she's here, night after night. The oaks creak and the air grows colder. You think of the tavern's ale, the mandrake's roots, the witch's salves, all chasing escape, all risking ruin. This woman's path is lonelier, her high a prayer, but it's no safer. You feel a pang for her. Her life paired to this grove, this vial, this hope. She's not running from toil like the peasants or politics like the nobles. She's running toward something bigger, and it's costing her. The stars shift and you realize dawn's not far. The woman's still, maybe sleeping, maybe lost in her bells. You're not here to join her vigil. You're here to trace the thread of her ecstasy, to see how it weaves into this wild, hazy world. The path out of the grove calls, leading back to the village. You leave her to her visions, the vial's scent fading, but not forgotten. This journey's showing you a pattern. Every high, from ale to datura, is a rebellion against a world that grinds souls down. You're ready for the next secret, the next glimpse into medieval defiance. You leave the mystic's moonlit grove, her fervent chants fading, as you join a bustling caravan trail, where merchants' carts creak under sacks of spices and silk. The air hums with dust sweat and the sharp tang of foreign herbs, a stark shift from the village's familiar damp. You're here to trek the Silk Road's medieval outposts, sampling the exotic substances that traders brought to Europe, new highs that set hearts racing and minds adrift. Camels snort, bells jingle, and a trader's sly grin catches your eye as he unpacks a bundle of strange roots and resins. You're not here to buy, but to uncover how these imports from hashish to rare barks fed the medieval craving for escape. You fall in step with the caravan, the horizon shimmering with promise and peril, ready to explore a world of intoxicating trade. In medieval Europe, trade routes like the Silk Road and Mediterranean ports funneled a stream of exotic goods, saffron, myrrh, and drugs that villagers could only whisper about. Hashish, already a noble favorite, poured in from the Levant, but traders also carried less familiar highs, like betel nut from Asia chewed, for a warm, stimulating buzz that sharpened senses and loosened tongues. You pause by a stall where a turpent merchant offers a betel leaf. Wrapped around a nut, its scent peppery and strange. A 13th century travelogue by Marco Polo mentions betel as a cheerer of spirits in Eastern markets, noting its spread to European ports. Merchants sold it to sailors, scholars, and anyone with coin, feeding a hunger for novelty in a world of mud and monotony, plowing fields, dodging plagues, or bowing to lords. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some betel chewers swore they heard the sea sing. Port town records from Italy describe sailors claiming oceanic melodies, or visions of mermaids after heavy chewing. Were these just the nuts alkaloids at work, or did maritime myths shape their trips? Historians still argue whether these experiences influenced seafaring lore, or if stories of sirens drove the nuts' popularity. You take a closer look at the betel, its green leaf glistening, and feel a slight buzz just from the idea. The merchant's watching his grin, daring you to try, but you wave him off, remembering the mystic's datura vial. You're here to trace the trade, not to hear waves croon. The caravan's a chaotic symphony, shouting vendors, bleeding goats, and the clink of coins. You weave through stalls piled with cloves, amber, and small clay jars that hint at rarer wares. Beyond betel traders peddled cat leaves, another import chewed in Arabian markets for a jittery, talkative high. Cat wasn't common in Europe, but coastal elites snatched it up, mixing it with wine for late-night debates or courtly flirtations. You spot a jar labeled with unfamiliar script, its contents leafy and damp. The merchant claims it's talking leaves, and you imagine a noble tongue, racing, arguing philosophy till dawn. You think of the castle's saffron sweets, the healer's poppy, same chase, bigger world. These routes didn't just bring goods. They brought temptations, each with a price. The risks were steep. Betel could stain teeth and wreck stomachs. Cat left chewers wired, then drained, sometimes paranoid. Overdoses or bad batches sparked worse hallucinations, seizures, or heart failure. A 14th century port log from Venice notes a trader collapsing after Eastern leaves his crew, blaming a cursed cargo. The church, sniffing sin, preached against foreign vices, but merchants thrived in the gaps, their stalls half legal, half shadow. You notice a monk browsing nearby, his eyes lingering on a beetle wrap before he scurries off, robes flapping. You chuckle, temptation's universal, isn't it? The merchant offers you a sample. His pitch smooth as silk, but you sidestep wary of the opium merchant's grin echoing in your memory. The trail pulses with life traders, haggling a bard, strumming for coins, a child dodging camels with a stolen fig. You pause by a spice stall, its air thick with cinnamon and something sharper. Maybe myrrh, another import, with a subtle narcotic kick when burned. Myrrh wasn't just for incense. Some crushed it into wine, chasing a calm that bordered on trance. You imagine a scholar quill forgotten, staring at stars after a mere laced cup. These highs weren't for peasants. They were for those with gold, those sailors and porters sometimes snuck a taste. You think of the festival's hedge mustard, the witches' salves. The caravan's drugs are pricier, but the urge is the same, to break free, to feel the world expand. You move on, the merchant's voice fading. A woman in a hooded cloak buys a small jar, her hands quick like she's hiding it from prying eyes. Maybe she's a healer stocking up for her hut, or a noble servant fetching a lord's next thrill. The trade routes were veins pumping new highs into Europe's heart, but they also spread wrist-bad deals, fake goods or drugs cut with poison. You spot a guard eyeing the stalls, his hand on his sword. He's not here for spices. He's watching for trouble. You feel a pang for the woman, her purchase a gamble in more ways than one. The caravan's a marketplace of dreams, but every dream has a shadow. The sun climbs, and the trail grows hotter, dust coating your boots. You lean against the cart, the beetle's peppery scent still in your nose. These routes connected worlds, east to west, earth to ecstasy. But they also expose the medieval soul, restless, curious, reckless. You think of the tavern's ale, the mandrake's roots, the mystic's vial. The caravan's highs are global, but the hunger's local, born of lives, stretched thin by labor and loss. A boy runs past, waving a stolen beetle leaf, his grin pure mischief. You shake your head, amused, troubles the same everywhere, isn't it? The caravan stretches toward the horizon, its colors blurring in the heat. You're starting to see this world as a web, every stall, every route, every high a thread in a tapestry of defiance. You're not here to chew beetle or sip myrrh. You're here to follow the pulse of a culture that craved more than it was given. The trail beckons, leading deeper into the village's secrets, and you're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You turn from the caravan's dusty bustle, the merchant's beetle leaf fading from your senses as you approach a stone church, its steeple piercing the morning mist. The air carries the faint scent of incense and damp moss, and bells toll, softly calling the faithful. You're here to uncover the church's hypocritical stance, a tangled dance of condemning mind-altering substances, while quietly tolerating or even indulging in them. You slip through the heavy oak doors into a dim nave, where candlelight flickers over stained glass, and a priest murmurs at the altar. The air's thick with sanctity, but you're looking for the cracks, the moments when holy men turned a blind eye to the very highs they preached against. You settle into a pew, the wood creaking, ready to peel back the church's veil of piety. In medieval Europe, the church was the moral arbiter, railing against drunkenness, sorcery, and anything that dulled the soul's devotion to God. Yet its stance on intoxicants was murkier than its sermons suggested. Monks brewed ale laced with herbs like yarrow, which could spark a mild buzz, and some priests sipped wines infused with poppy or saffron for medicinal reasons. You notice a chalice on the altar, its rim gleaming, and wonder if it holds more than sacramental wine. A 13th century monastic rulebook, De Regula Benedicti, allows ale for monks, but warns against excess, saying nothing about the herbs that made it more than a drink. The church condemned the tavern's gruit and the witches' salves, but its own cellars hid similar secrets used by clerics to ease pain, inspire sermons, or simply cope with cloistered life. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests claimed spiced wine opened their hearts to God. Scattered records from French monasteries describe clerics drinking saffron-laced vintages before writing ecstatic hymns, their words glowing with divine fire. Were these just the spice's mild hallucinogens, or did faith amplify the experience? Historians still argue whether such practices shaped religious poetry, or if spiritual fervor justified the indulgence. You catch a whiff of incense, sweet heavy maybe, mixed with myrrh, from the caravan stalls, and your head feels light like the church itself is weaving a spell. The priest's chant falters his eyes distant, and you wonder if he's tasted something extra in his cup tonight. The nave is quiet save for the shuffle of a few penitents kneeling nearby. You spot a monk in the shadows, his hands fidgeting with a rosary, but his gaze lingers on a small vial tucked in his sleeve. Poppy syrup, perhaps like the healer's brew, used to soothe a toothache or quiet doubts. The church's hypocrisy wasn't universal. Many clergy were strict, but loopholes abounded. Monasteries grew herbs like henbane, that tavern smoke again for healing, and bishops dined with nobles, sampling hashish sweets without a sermon's scorn. You think of the mystic's datura, the festival's hedge mustard, the castle's saffron. The church's men weren't so different, chasing relief or revelation, just cloaked in crosses and guilt. You smirk, bet that monks praying for forgiveness already. The risks were real even here. Poppy could addict or kill. Saffron in excess sparked visions that could be mistaken for heresy. A 14th century trial record from Italy describes a priest excommunicated for visions from unholy wine, his defense of divine inspiration falling flat. The church policed its own but unevenly high-ranking bishops, often escaped scrutiny while village priests faced harsher judgment. You notice the priest at the altar pause, sipping from his chalice with a careful glance around. He's no fool. He knows the line he's towing. You imagine him slipping a drop of poppy into his wine, just enough to soften the weight of his flock's sins. You're not here to confess. You're here to see the truth behind the incense. The church's cool stone walls seem to close in the candles casting long shadows. A woman kneels nearby her prayers, fervent, unaware of the vial in the monk's sleeve. The church was a paradox. It damned the alewives' gruit as sin, but blessed its own brews as holy. You think of the pilgrim's St. John's wort, the witch's belladonna condemned as devilry, yet mirrored in the monastery's herb gardens. The monk shifts, tucking the vial deeper, and you feel a pang for him. His life prayers fasts. Silence is as grinding as any peasant's, and that vial's his escape, however small. You chuckle softly, holy or not. Everyone's chasing something, aren't they? The bells toll again, signaling matins, and more villagers trickle in their faces, weary but hopeful. You spot a young acolyte, barely a teen, carrying a censer that swings with myrrh-heavy smoke. His eyes are wide, maybe from the fumes or the late hour. You imagine him sneaking a sip of the priest's wine, curious, then stumbling through prayers with a grin. Kids find trouble even in church, don't they? The priest's voice rises steady now. But you're not fooled. This place, with its soaring arches and sacred boughs, hides the same hunger you saw in the tavern. The grove, the caravan, a need to break free, to feel more than the world allows. You lean back in the pew, the wood cool against your back. The incense swirls its sweetness cloying, and you're starting to see the church's role in this hazy world. It wasn't just a judge. It was a player dipping into the same highs it condemned, all while preaching purity. the monk's vial, the priest's chalice, the mirror's smoke, their threads in the tapestry of medieval escape, woven with the alewife's bruise, the mystic's datura, the merchant's betel. You're not here to pray or judge. You're here to trace the cracks in the church's armor. The nave glows softly, and the path outside calls leading deeper into the village's secrets. You're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You slip out of the church's incense-heavy nave, the priest's chalice glinting in your memory as you follow a narrow alley to a stone tower, its windows glowing with an eerie flickering light. The air grows sharp with sulfur and charred herbs, a strange shift from the village's damp earth. You're here to peer into the alchemist's labs, where potions blurred the line between science and sorcery, chasing mind-bending highs under the guise of discovery. A heavy door creaks open, revealing shelves of vials, bubbling flasks, and a hooded figure hunched over a fire. You're not here to brew or sip. You're here to uncover how these seekers of truth toyed with substances that sent their minds spiraling. You step inside the heat prickling your skin, ready to explore a world where knowledge and madness brewed in the same crucible. In medieval Europe, alchemists were part scientist, part mystic, obsessed with turning lead to gold or finding the elixir of life. But their experiments often wandered into the mind's uncharted corners, using herbs, minerals, and strange brews to unlock hidden truths. One favorite was mandragora wine, a potent mix of mandrake, those twisted roots again, and fermented grapes believed to sharpen intellect or spark visions of cosmic secrets. You eye a flask on the alchemist's table, its contents dark and swirling, giving off a faint, bitter whiff. A 13th century alchemical text, attributed to Albertus Magnus, mentions mandragora as a key to the soul's gate used to enhance meditation, but warns of its power to unmoor the mind. Alchemists weren't just chasing gold, they were chasing transcendence, risking their sanity to glimpse the universe's blueprint. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some alchemists claim their potions let them see the stars dance. A few manuscripts from Italy describe brews that showed celestial patterns or voices reciting formulas in the night. Were these just mandrake's hallucinations, or did they inspire early scientific thought? Historians still argue whether such visions shaped alchemy's quest for knowledge or if mystical traditions drove the experiments. You lean closer to the flask, its fumes stinging your nose, and feel a slight dizziness, like the room's tilting toward the stars. The alchemist doesn't notice you, too focused on his bubbling concoction. But you're not here to see constellations, just to understand his risky craft. The lab's a chaos of tools, crucibles, bellows jars of colored powders. The alchemist, his hands stained with soot, adds a pinch of something green, maybe henbane, that old tavern friend, to a simmering pot. Henbane wasn't just for witches. Alchemists used it to open the mind's eye, hoping for insights into nature's secrets. But these brews were no game. A sip could make you feel like you're solving the cosmos, or leave you babbling about demons. You imagine the alchemist late at night tasting his latest mix and waking up, convinced he's cracked immortality. You smirk, bet he had a headache instead. The church eyed these labs warily, suspecting heresy. But alchemists often had noble patrons, shielding them from pyres. You think of the castle's hashish, the church's poppy wine, same hunger, fancier tools. The risks were steep. Mandrake could stop your heart. Henbane could trap you in a fever delirium. A 14th century record from France tells of an alchemist found dead, surrounded by spilled vials, his notes raving about golden visions. The line between experiment and excess was thin, and alchemists walked it boldly, driven by curiosity or obsession. You notice a second figure younger scribbling in a corner. Maybe an apprentice learning the art but fearing the cost. His eyes dart to the flask, nervous but curious. You feel a pang for him. This life's a gamble like the healer's poppy or the witch's salves. The alchemist stirs his pot, muttering about the great work, and you wonder if he's chasing truth or just chasing the buzz. The lab's heat is stifling the air thick with fumes that make your head swim. You spot a shelf of strange ingredients, mercury, sulfur, dried toadskin, each a potential key or poison. Alchemists didn't just brew. They inhaled vapors or rubbed salves, hoping to unlock hidden realms. Some used belladonna like the witches to see beyond the veil, but the results were unpredictable genius or gibberish. You think of the mystic's datura, the caravan's beetle. This tower's a crucible for the same urge to break free to know more than the world allows. The apprentice sets down his quill, sneaking a glance at the flask. You shake your head, amused kids always want the shiny danger, don't they? The fire pops and a vial bubbles over, sending a sharp scent through the room. The alchemist curses, fanning the steam, and you step back, staying in the shadows. This isn't the tavern's rowdy chaos or the grove's quiet faith, it's a lone quest, precise but reckless. Alchemists weren't just mixing potions. They were mapping the soul, risking everything for a spark of insight. You notice a small cross on the wall, a nod to appease the church, but the real faith here is in the flasks. The alchemist's hands tremble, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from a sip gone wrong. You imagine him seeing stars, not gold, and scribbling nonsense till dawn. The apprentice watches learning but wary, and you feel the weight of their world knowledge as dangerous as any drug. The tower's walls seem to pulse with secrets, each vial a story of ambition and risk. You think of the festival's bread, the pilgrim's herbs, the church's wine, all threads in the same tapestry woven from a need to escape or understand. The alchemists no different, just better funded. You're not here to brew or break, you're here to see how far they pushed, how close they came to cracking the world open. The path outside beckons, leading back to the village, where more secrets simmer. You're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You step away from the alchemist's smoky tower, the sting of sulfur fading, as you weave back through the village, to the familiar glow of the tavern, its rafters shaking with laughter and song. The air's thick with ale and sweat, and the storyteller's voice rises above the din, weaving tales that twist reality into myth. You're here to listen, not just to the stories, but to the mind-bending brews that fueled them, drinks that turned tavern nights into whirlwinds of wild yarns and blurry dreams. You squeeze onto a bench, the wood sticky with spilled ale, and catch the eye of a grizzled bard, his mug raised as he spins a tale of dragons and ghosts. You're not here to drink, you're here to uncover how these hazy nights birthed stories that outlived their tellers. The tavern's pulse pulls you in, and you're ready to dive into its boozy tale-spinning chaos. In medieval Europe, taverns were more than drinking dens. They were stages where peasants, travelers, and rogues swapped stories, often fueled by ales laced with herbs like bog myrtle or darnel. These brews didn't just loosen tongues. They sparked visions, turning a farmer's yarn about a wolf into a saga of a fire-breathing beast. You grab a mug from a passing tray, its contents cloudy, smelling of malt, and something sharper, maybe yarrow, a grewed herb, that could make you feel floaty. Your words bolder than your wits. A 13th century tavern log from England mentions yarrow ale as a tongue lifter popular for its kick, but silent on how it stretched truths into epics. These nights weren't just about drinking, they were about escaping the plow, the taxman, or the fear of tomorrow, through stories born in a haze. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some drinkers swore their ale let them see old heroes. A few oral tales from the Low Countries describe tavern-goers claiming to glimpse knights or ancestors in the firelight after a strong mug. Were these just Yarrow's mild hallucinogens? Or did the tavern's storytelling culture shape their visions? Historians still argue whether these brews fueled medieval folklore, or if the tales themselves encourage spiking the ale. You sip the mug, it's bite sharp, and feel a warmth spreading like your thoughts are loosening. The bard's tale grows wilder, a dragon's now flying over the village, and you grin wondering if his ale's talking. You're not here to see ghosts, just to hear how these knights wove magic from mud. The tavern's a riot. Fiddles, screech, mugs clink, and a drunk stumbles into a table laughing. The bard's in his element, gesturing wildly, his story now involving a witch who rides the dragon. You spot the alewife, her apron stained, pouring more of the cloudy brew. She's no stranger to the game, slipping in herbs to keep the crowd buzzing. Darnell, a weedy grass, was another tavern trick. Its faint, psychoactive kick could make you see shapes in the shadows or turn a neighbor's gossip into a mythic feud. You think of the festival's hedge mustard, the alchemist's mandragora wine, same urge, rowdier setting. The bard's mug is half empty and his eyes gleam like he's half in his tale, half in a dream. You smirk, bet he's seen that dragon himself. These brews were no joke. Darnell could sicken you. Yarrow in excess, spark dizziness or wild mood swings. A 14th century chronicle from Germany tells of a tavern brawl where drinkers maddened by ale fought over a story's ending, some claiming they saw the devil in the rafters. The church frowned on such chaos, preaching sobriety, but priests often drank here too. You notice one in the corner, his tonsure, catching the light, chuckling at the bard's tale. Hypocrisy's old news, remember the church's poppy wine. You chuckle. Even the holy can't resist a good story or a good buzz. The alewife's sharp eye sweeps the room, ensuring no one's too far gone. You're tempted to take another sip, but the healer's Valerian warning lingers. You're here to listen, not lose yourself. The crowd leans in as the bard spins a new tale. A knight battling a shadow beast, born from a cursed brew. The room roars, some cheering, others arguing the details. You see a woman, her braid loose, shouting that she saw the same beast last week. Her mug's empty and her grin's too wide. She's deep in the Yarrow haze. Taverns like this were where legends grew, fed by herbs and hunger. You think of the mystic's datura, the caravan's beetle, the castle's hashish. These tales spun from cloudy ale were the peasant's version, raw, messy, alive. A boy barely old enough to drink leans forward, eyes wide, soaking in every word. You shake your head, amused kids always fall for the wildest stories, don't they? The fire crackles, and the tavern's warmth wraps around you. The bard pauses, gulping his ale, and you wonder how much is memory, how much is the brew talking. These nights were escape, same as the witch's salves or the pilgrim's herbs, but they were also creation, birthing tales that shaped villages for generations. You notice a man sketching in charcoal on a table, trying to capture the dragon's wings. He's swaying, probably seeing more than he's drawing. The alewife refills mugs, her herbs tucked away, and you feel a pang for these people. Their lives hard, their stories wild, their highs a fleeting rebellion against the grind. The night deepens, the tavern's glow holding you. The bard's tale ends, but another storyteller rises, her voice softer but no less vivid. The crowd hushes, mugs raised, ready for the next myth. You set your own mug down, its contents untouched, and lean back, the bench creaking. This place, with its hazy brews and taller tales, is a mirror of the village's heart, defiant, desperate, alive. You're not here to spin stories. You're here to trace their roots, to see how ale and herbs wove a world bigger than the one outside. The path beckons leading deeper into the village's secrets, and you're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You ease out of the tavern's boozy clamor, the bard's dragon tale still ringing, as you follow a rutted path to a training field, where warriors spar under a gray dawn sky. The air's sharp with sweat leather and the metallic tang of clashing swords, but there's another scent, herbal bitter, like the healer's valerian. You're here to march with soldiers who use plants, not just to heal wounds, but to sharpen or dull their senses before battle, chasing a high to face death head-on. You slip into the crowd of onlookers, their cheers, mixing with grunts of effort, and spot a grizzled fighter chewing something as he tightens his armor. You're not here to swing a blade. You're here to uncover the battle boosters that turn fear into ferocity or pain into haze. The field pulses with raw energy, and you're ready to dive into this world of blood and herbs. In medieval Europe, warriors, knights, mercenaries, or village levies faced brutal combat where a single misstep meant death. To cope, some turned to herbs like mandrake or hemp, chewed or brewed to steady nerves, boost courage, or numb the agony of wounds. Hemp, less potent than the castle's hashish, but easier to find, could calm a racing heart, making the clash of steel feel distant, almost dreamlike. You notice a soldier passing a small pouch to his comrade, its contents green and fibrous, likely hemp leaves. A 14th century military manual from Germany mentions hemp as a soldier's balm, used to ease fear before sieges, but warns of its dulling fog. These men weren't just fighting enemies. They were fighting their own minds, using plants to push through terror or pain. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some warriors claimed hemp let them see the battle's end. A few battlefield accounts from France describe fighters seeing visions of victory or fallen comrades after chewing leaves as if they'd glimpsed fate. Were these just hemp's mild psychoactive effects? Or did the stress of war shape their trips? Historians still argue whether these visions influenced military morale, or if tales of heroism drove the herb's use. You catch the pouch's faint, earthy whiff as it passes nearby, and your pulse quickens like the field's tension is seeping into you. The soldier's chewing faster now, his eyes steady but distant, and you wonder if he's seeing that victory already. You're not here to fight, you're here to trace their courage's source. The field's a chaos of motion, swords clash, shields splinter, and a young squire darts through carrying water skins that smell suspiciously herbal. Mandrake, like the alchemist's wine, was another booster. A small dose could dull pain, letting a wounded man keep swinging. But it wasn't all about grit. Some warriors used henbane, that tavern smoke again, to enter a trance, their fear buried under a haze of aggression. You think of the tavern's yarrow ale, the mystic's datura, the castle's saffron sweets, same hunger, deadlier stakes. The grizzled fighter spits out his chew, his face set like stone, and charges into a sparring match. His moves fierce but sloppy. You smirk, bet that hemp's making him bold, not precise. The risks were brutal. Hemp could slow reflexes, turning a warrior into a sitting duck. Mandrake, misdosed, left you convulsing mid-battle. A 13th century chronicle from England tells of a mercenary band that chewed war herbs before a raid, only to stumble raving into an ambush. The church condemned such practices as pagan or sinful, but commanders often looked the other way. Victory trumped piety. You spot a priest among the onlookers, his face stern, but his eyes curious as he watches the pouch pass. You chuckle, holy men always hover near the action, don't they? The squire offers you a sip from his skin, his grin daring. You wave it off, remembering the healer's poppy warning. You're here to watch, not to wobble. The crowd roars as a knight lands a heavy blow, his opponent staggering. You notice the victor's hands shaking, maybe from adrenaline, maybe from whatever he chewed. These boosters weren't just for battle. They were for survival through long marches, sleepless nights, or the screams of the wounded. You think of the festival's hedge mustard, the caravan's beetle. Warriors' highs were practical, born of necessity, but no less reckless. A young recruit, barely bearded, chews his own leaves, his face pale but determined. You shake your head, amused kids always leap into danger, don't they? He's probably dreaming of glory, not the grave. The field's rhythm is relentless. Clanging metals, shouted orders, the thud of boots on dirt. You lean against the fence, the hemp's scent lingering in the air. These men weren't just fighting for lords or land, they were fighting to feel alive, to push past the fear that gnawed at them. A wounded soldier limps off, clutching a rag soaked in something, maybe mandrake salve. His face is calm, too calm, and you wonder if he'll make it through the night. The grizzled fighter's back, wiping sweat and grinning, his chew gone, but his eyes still glassy. You feel a pang for them, their lives balanced on a blade's edge, their highs a desperate grab for control. The sun climbs and the sparring slows the crowd thinning. You're starting to see the thread running through this world tavern, church, castle, battlefield. Every high, from ale to hemp, was a shield against a life that demanded too much. The priest lingers, whispering to a knight, maybe offering absolution or just gossip. The squire's still darting about, his water skin sloshing, and you wonder what else he's carrying. You're not here to fight or flee. You're here to trace the pulse of this raw, defiant world. The path stretches beyond the field, back to the village where more secrets wait. You're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You leave the battlefield's clang and sweat behind the warrior's hemp-laced courage, fading as you slip down a quiet village lane to a hidden courtyard where women gather in a soft circle under a willow's drooping branches. The air's cool, scented with lavender and a faint earthy tang, like the healer's hut, but softer, more intimate. You're here to slip into their secret rituals where they shared psychoactive plant knowledge, herbs and brews that soothed, empowered, or sent minds soaring in defiance of their world's constraints. A low fire crackles, illuminating faces lined with care, but alight with quiet strength. You're not here to join their circle. You're here to uncover the whispered wisdom that fueled their highs, a rebellion woven into their daily lives. You crouch behind the willow, the leaves brushing your shoulders, ready to glimpse a sisterhood that thrived in the shadows. In medieval Europe, women, midwives, mothers, spinsters often held the village's herbal secrets, passing down recipes for remedies and rituals that blurred healing and ecstasy. Chamomile brewed strong was a favorite. Its calming warmth could ease childbirth pains or spark gentle visions like dreams unfolding in daylight. You spot a woman stirring a clay pot over the fire, its steam carrying a floral sweetness. A 13th century women's health text, the Trotula, praises chamomile for soothing the womb, but doesn't mention how larger doses could make you feel like you're floating above the village. These women weren't just easing cramps, they were crafting escapes, sharing highs to cope with labor laws, or the weight of a patriarchal world that bound them to heart and hardship. Here's a quirky tidbit: some women claimed chamomile teas let them see their unborn children. A few oral traditions from England describe mothers to be dreaming of their babies' faces after sipping a potent brew, as if the herb opened a window to the future. Were these visions just chamomile's sedative haze? Or did they shape women's spiritual bonds with their families? Historians still argue whether these rituals reinforce matrilineal lore or if folklore drove the herb's use. You catch the tea's soft scent, and your shoulders loosen like the fire's warmth is tugging you into their circle. The women's voices are low, a hum of shared stories, and you're tempted to listen closer, but you stay hidden. You're here to learn, not intrude. The courtyard's a sanctuary, baskets of herbs loom in the corner, a child sleeping nearby. The woman stirring the pot adds a pinch of something darker, maybe mugwort, another ritual staple known for vivid dreams or a sense of walking between worlds. Mugwort wasn't just for mystics. Women used it to ease menstrual pain or spark visions. During gatherings bonding over shared secrets. You think of the healer's valerian, the witch's belladonna, the tavern's yarrow ale. Same thread, softer weave. These rituals were defiance, a claim to power in a world that offered them little. A younger woman, her hands calloused from spinning sips from a cup, her eyes softening. You imagine her seeing something, a lost sister, a future child, and you smirk, wondering if she'll share it or keep it close. The risks were real. Chamomile overdone could dizzy or sicken. Mugwort could trigger seizures or heavy bleeding. A 14th century record from France tells of a women's circle blamed for a miscarriage after a ritual brew went wrong. The church quick to cry witchcraft. These women knew the stakes, their gatherings hidden from prying priests or suspicious husbands. You notice one keeping watch, her gaze sharp, ready to hush the group if footsteps near. They're not witches, but they're close enough to draw the church's ire. You feel a pang for them, their knowledge a lifeline and a curse. The fire's glow dances on their faces and you're reminded of the herbwife's cauldron. The mystic's grove, sisterhoods of survival brewing rebellion in every cup. The circle tightens as the women pass the pot, each sipping carefully. A grandmotherly figure tells a story, her voice low, about a dream where she flew over the fields. The others nod, some smiling, some wide-eyed. You think of the festival's hedge mustard, the alchemist's mandragora. Same hunger, quieter expression. These rituals weren't loud like the tavern or grand like the castle. They were intimate, a shared defiance against a world that demanded their silence. A girl, barely a teen, watches eagerly, clutching a sprig of lavender. You shake your head, amused kids always want in on the secrets, don't they? She's learning just like the healer's apprentice, carrying wisdom that could save or damn her. The fire pops and the women's laughter ripples soft but strong. You lean against the willow, its bark cool, and feel the courtyard's warmth pull you in. These brews weren't just about highs. They were about connection to each other, to the earth, to lives they could only dream. You notice a woman slip a vial into her apron, maybe for a sister too sick to join. The circle's a web linking mothers, daughters, friends, each sip a thread of trust. You think of the pilgrim's herbs, the warrior's hemp, the church's wine, all chasing escape. But this feels deeper rooted in shared survival. The watcher scans the darkness, and you stay still, not wanting to break their spell. The night deepens, the fire's glow fading to embers. The women's voices soften their ritual winding down, but the air still hums with their strength. You're starting to see the village as a tapestry of rebellion. Tavern, church, battlefield. Now this courtyard, each a stage for defying the grind. The chamomile's scent lingers like the tavern's ale, or the mystic's datura, a reminder of the risks they took for a moment of power. You're not here to sip or join. You're here to trace their quiet courage. The path out of the courtyard calls leading deeper into the village's secrets, and you're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You slip away from the women's quiet courtyard, the chamomile's soft scent fading as you tread a somber path through the village, where the air grows heavy with ash and fear. A cart rattles past, piled with shrouded bodies and hushed voices, whisper of plague. You're here to witness survivors turning to substances for escape, seeking relief from grief and terror, in a world turned upside down by death. The sun's low, casting long shadows over makeshift graves, and you spot a lone figure by a hut, clutching a vial with trembling hands. You're not here to mourn or meddle. You're here to uncover how these desperate souls used herbs and brews to dull the pain of a plague-ravaged life. You step closer, the air thick with loss, ready to explore a dark corner of medieval survival. In medieval Europe, the Black Death and lesser plagues tore through villages, leaving half-empty homes and hearts heavy with loss. Survivors haunted by death's shadow often turned to familiar plants, poppy, henbane, even mandrake to numb their grief or fear. Poppy syrup milked from rare pots was a favorite. A few drops could wrap you in a warm, dreamlike haze, making the wail of mourners feel distant. You pause by the figure, a woman, her face gaunt, sipping from her vial, its contents dark and syrupy. A 14th century apothecary's log calls poppy a gift of forgetfulness used for pain but also to quiet the soul's torment. These survivors weren't chasing fun, they were fleeing memories of carts piled high, neighbors gone, and the dread of who'd be next. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some claimed poppy let them speak with the departed. Scattered accounts from plague-struck Italy describe survivors dreaming of lost kin. So vividly, they swore the dead stood before them. Were these just opium's narcotic visions? Or did they shape medieval beliefs about ghosts? Historians still argue whether these experiences fueled spiritual practices or if folklore drove the drug's use. You catch the vial's faint floral scent, and your chest tightens like the woman's grief is seeping into you. She's staring at nothing, her eyes glassy, and you wonder if she's seeing her family now. You're not here to sip, you're here to trace the edge of her despair. The village feels hollow, its usual bustle muted. A few souls linger, children fetching water, an old man digging a grave. You spot another survivor, a man chewing dried leaves by a fence, his hands shaking. Maybe henbane like the tavern smoke to dull his fear of the next cough. These remedies weren't new. Poppy echoed the healer's vials, henbane, the witch's salves, but the plague made them urgent. Survivors used them to sleep, to forget, or to face another day of burying kin. You think of the warrior's hemp, the women's chamomile, the alchemist's mandragora, same hunger, grimmer stakes. The man spits out a leaf, his face blank, and you imagine him trying to outrun the image of a child's shroud. The risks were brutal. Poppy could steal your breath. Henbane could spark terrors worse than waking grief. A 13th century chronicle from France tells of a village where survivors overdosed on grief drafts, wandered fields raving about demons before collapsing. The church, strained by plague, called such use sinful, but priests offered little else. Prayers didn't fill empty beds. You notice a cleric nearby, his robes, dusty, handing out bread but avoiding the woman's vial. His eyes flicker with pity. Maybe guilt remembered the church's poppy wine. You smirk. Even holy men knew the need for escape even if they wouldn't admit it. You're tempted to comfort the woman, but her gaze warns you off. You're here to watch, not heal. The hut's shadow looms, and you see more vials on a crude shelf left by a healer or apothecary who didn't survive. The woman sips again, her movements slow like she's sinking into herself. These substances weren't just relief, they were rebellion against a world that offered none. You think of the tavern's yarrow ale, the mystic's datura, the caravan's beetle, all escapes. But this feels raw, a fight to keep breathing. A boy, maybe 10, darts past, stealing a glance at the vials. You shake your head, half amused, half sad. Kids always find the danger, don't they? He's gone before you can warn him off to fetch water or dodge his own grief. The air grows colder, the sun dipping low. You lean against the fence watching the woman's silhouette. Survivors like her weren't just numbing pain, they were reclaiming a sliver of control, however risky. You notice another figure, an old woman, muttering prayers as she chews something, maybe mandrake, hoping for a vision of her lost son. The village's tapestry is fraying, but these highs poppy henbane, whatever works, are threads holding it together. You feel a pang for them, their lives shattered, yet stubborn each sip, a defiance against death's grip. The cleric moves on his breath gone, and you wonder if he's ever tried the bile himself just to sleep. The path stretches past the hut, back toward the village's heart, but you linger, the woman's stillness haunting you. This isn't the festival's joy or the castle's decadence, it's survival stripped bare. The poppy's scent, the henbane's bite, they're kin to the alewife's gruit, the warrior's hemp, the women's chamomile, all chasing a moment of peace. You're not here to grieve or sip, you're here to witness their fight to trace the pulse of a world refusing to break. The dusk settles, and the path calls, leading deeper into the village's secrets. You're ready for the next twist in this wild, hazy journey. You wander from the plague-stricken village, the woman's poppy-laced bile, still heavy in your thoughts, as you drift toward a quiet meadow, where fireflies blink under a fading twilight. The air's soft, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp grass. A gentle shift from the ash and grief. You're here to fade into a final medieval haze, letting the world of taverns, witches, and warriors dissolve into a dreamlike calm. A lone figure sits by a stream sipping a brew that smells faintly of chamomile, and something deeper, maybe valerian, maybe hope. You're not here to drink or dream. You're here to wrap up this journey, to let the highs and risks of a brutal world settle into a whisper of peace. You lie back in the grass, the stars emerging ready to ease into this final sleepy chapter. In medieval Europe, the search for escape wasn't just about chaos, it was about finding moments of stillness like this meadow where herbs offered a soft landing. Chamomile, that women's ritual favorite, was brewed not just for visions but for rest, its floral warmth, lulling you into a haze where the world's edges blurred. You imagine the figure by the stream, their cup steaming, seeking the same calm that peasants, nobles, and mystics chased in their own ways. A 14th century herbal, the herbarium Apulae, calls chamomile a gift of gentle sleep used to soothe nerves or quiet fears, but doesn't mention how it could feel like sinking into a warm, endless sea. This wasn't the tavern's yarrow ale or the alchemist's mandragora. It was simpler, a high that felt like surrender, not rebellion. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some claimed chamomile let them dream of tomorrow's sun. A few village tales from England describe sleepers seeing bright fields or smiling faces after a strong brew, as if the herb promised hope. Were these just sedative dreams, or did they shape medieval optimism? Historians still argue whether such visions fed resilience or if folklore drove the herb's use. You catch the brew's faint scent drifting from the figure's cup, and your eyelids grow heavy like the meadows pulling you down. The fireflies pulse, and you wonder if they're stars or just your eyes playing tricks. You're not here to sleep, you're here to let this world's haze wrap you one last time. The meadow's quiet, save for the stream's soft gurgle, and the figure's low hum, a lullaby maybe, or a prayer. You think of the tavern's rowdy tales, the witches' salves, the warrior's hemp, all chasing escape, all risking ruin. Chamomile's gentler, but it's still a gamble. Too much could leave you groggy, lost in a fog that lingered past dawn. You imagine villagers sipping it after a day of plowing or burying kin. their minds drifting to fields that never failed. The figure by the stream sips again, their shoulders easing, and you feel a pang for them, this meadow's a refuge. But the world beyond it waits with its plagues and lords. You think of the healers Valerian, the mystics Datura, same need, softer touch. The risks here were subtler but real. Chamomile could slow your heart if brewed too strong. Mixed with other herbs like poppy, it could trap you in a sleep too deep. A 13th century record from Germany tells of a village where a sleeping tea left elders dazed for days some never waken. The church, ever watchful, tolerated chamomile as medicine, but eyed its overuse, fearing idleness or worse. You notice a small cross glinting on the figure's neck, a nod to faith, but their cup tells a truer story. You smirk, even the devout needed a break, didn't they? The stream's ripple feels like a lullaby, and you're tempted to close your eyes, but the plague's grim cards keep you alert. You're here to watch, not drift. The meadow stretches wide, its grasses swaying in a breeze that carries the village's echoes, tavern songs, pilgrims' hymns, the clang of swords. You think of the caravan's beetle, the church's poppy wine, the women's mugwort. Each was a thread in a tapestry of defiance, woven to outrun a world of toil and loss. The figure by the stream sets their cup down, lying back to watch the stars. They're not running from plague or pain. They're resting still in a moment of peace. You feel their calm, a contrast to the festival's chaos or the castle's decadence. A child's laugh carries from the village, faint but clear, and you shake your head. Amused kids always find joy even in the dark, don't they? You sink deeper into the grass, the fireflies weaving patterns above. This meadow's a pause, a breath between the village's highs and hazards. The figure's hum fades, their silhouette blending with the dusk. You're starting to see the medieval world as a pulse. Every herb, every brew, a beat against despair. From the tavern's ale to the alchemist's flasks, it was all about claiming something more, however fleeting. You're not here to sip chamomile or chase dreams. You're here to hold this world's story, to let its wild, hazy heart settle into yours. The stars brighten, and the meadow's quiet wraps you like a blanket. You think of the woman with her poppy vial, the bard's yarrow-fueled tales, the mystic's datura visions. They're all here in this soft haze, fading into a dream you don't need to drink to feel. The village's secrets are yours now, a tapestry of rebellion and rest. And you're ready to let it go, to let the night take over. The world softens, the meadow's edges blurring, as the stream's gentle ripple lulls you. The fireflies drift, their lights fading into the stars, and the village's weight, its plagues, its battles, its desperate highs, slips away. You're lying in the grass, the air cool against your skin, and the chamomile's scent lingers, a whisper of peace in a world that fought for every breath. These people, peasants, nobles, mystics, chased escape not to run, but to live, to steal moments of joy or clarity from a life that gave them little. Their herbs, their brews, their risks, they're all part of you now, woven into a story that hums like a distant lullaby. The night deepens, the stars steady, and you feel the pull of sleep soft and sure. Let the meadow hold you. Let the village fade and drift into the quiet, where dreams are safe and the world is kind.